regular meeting of the MRH Board of Education to order at 7 p.m. Can I please have you join me with the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Item 1.03, Public Forum. Madam Secretary, will we have a speaker tonight? We do. Please keep your comments to under 3 minutes and join us at the podium. Introduce yourself and begin.
Hi. I feel really nervous now. My name is Eleanor Pardini. I'm a parent of a first and fourth grader here. And on this winter solstice day and night, I am thinking about light and dark, cycles and circles, ends and begins, lines, spaces, and transitions, and how we hold space for both what is behind us and what is ahead of us. And tonight, I wanted to take a pause from the hustle and make space for gratitude. I want to share tonight 2 sets of thanks. First, to members of board and administration, and second, to Mr. Dodson and Ms. Elam at the elementary school. Board members, thank you to each of you for your service. Volunteering your time, effort, and energy for elected office in this role is an incredible service. You spend time reviewing documents at home, attending long meetings, showing up in our schools and at events, and listening to many voices. You carefully evaluate multiple lines of data, evidence, stories, and testimonies, some of which are visible and some of which are not, to make important decisions. You do the hard work of thoughtfully setting policy and responsibly stewarding our finances, all in service of the growth, development, and thriving of all of our MRH children. Speaking from my own experience, that work is not easy, and it is often lonely and difficult. I want to say that I see you, and I'm grateful for where MRH is now and where it is going. I'm thankful for each of you for giving of your skills and self to be here in service of our children and future. A couple of special notes to Katie Kaufman, my dear friend. Thank you for your many years of service to this board. I'm grateful for your service to our kids and a role you can now play in offering a long view and helping to mentor and guide new board members. I am constantly amazed by your vision, courage, clarity, eye for strategy, and your bold and generous heart. Amber, thank you for your service to MRH in so many different capacities over the last few years. I appreciate how you've kept this board laser focused on educational equity and making sure all students have the opportunity to thrive. I appreciate your emphasis on accountability and outcomes-driven work. Your love for our kids and our neighbors shines through your work. As a Maplewood resident, I'm excited for you to turn your deep and wide skill set and experience and talents toward responsibly stewarding our city in the coming years. Julie, I'm thrilled that you stepped up to serve in this open seat and that you filed for election next year. I watched your leadership in the district at the ECC and elementary school for years, and I'm thrilled that you're moving your experience and your skills into a role on the board. We are so ready for you on this team. Dr. Jameson, thank you for all of your vision, hard work, and laser focus on our kids' accountability and educational equity. I don't have good words for how much I believe in your work, and I'm grateful that you're here. Thank you. The second note of appreciation, I'm sorry if I'm going to go over my 3. The second note of appreciation I want to share is from Ms. Elam and Mr. Dodson at the elementary school. My son loves paper airplanes. At first, probably a year ago, as he began to spend hours on YouTube learning how to fold plans, I thought it was a passing hobby. Over time, I wondered what the fascination was, as I found myself constantly picking up folded paper all over the floors of every room and out of every light fixture. More recently, I've come to understand how my son has taken his plan folding to some kind of next level and moved on from following instructions to understanding principles of lift, air movement, and how to make the paper do what he wants. Now he creates his own designs with fins, flaps, up elevators, down elevators, and dihedral angles. He's engaging in scientific inquiry. He flies a plane, observes what happens, and then modifies the folds to adjust how the plane will fly. Oliver and his buddy engage in these activities in any free time they get, including breaks, lunch, recess, and Y Club. It would have been so easy for his teachers to view this activity as a nuisance or annoyance and shut it down. Instead, his classroom teacher, Mr. Dodson, has helped Oliver's passion and engagement to flourish, and it has turned into a book, a website, a school competition, and a club. Mr. Dodson helped Oliver and his friends set up a Google slide presentation, and they've written a 60-page book on their own plane designs. They edit it and send comments to each other on weekday afternoons and weekends. Mr. Dodson's going to help them print and bind their book. He also helped them create a website to share their plane designs. The kiddos recruited lunch and recess monitors to help them with a preliminary club. When I went to school the other day to pick up Oliver for early release, I actually found him in Miss Elam's office. She was helping him to choose some possible dates for a school paper airplane competition. She's obtaining prizes for the competition, and she's working on getting a sponsor to have a club next year. Mr. Dodson and Ms. Elam have helped Oliver and his friends engage in such meaningful activities and deep learning around this passion. Everything about this to me is the museum metaphor in action. They're learning so many skills in creating products in different forms, project management, perseverance on a long project, collaborative group work, and basic principles of physics. The teachers and admins at the elementary school are fostering agency, control, choice, and creativity. I'm so grateful for this ethos and practice among the teachers and administrators, for what is continuing and growing under Ms. Elam's leadership. I am so grateful that Ms. Elam and Mr. Dodson and MRH are helping my son take flight. Thank you.
And thank you for your own dedication. We move on to item 2.01, approval of the consent agenda. I believe we have some abstentions from the warrant list, correct? Okay. Can I get a motion in a second?
Move to approve the consent agenda as presented. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Yes. Opposed? Abstain? Yes. Motion carries. All right. Now we'll have item 3.01, prepayment of the bond debt with Mr. Boyd.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Didn't realize I was up so fast. Good evening, everyone. My name is Lorenzo Boyd with Stiefel. I believe, just kind of thinking about this is the first time we've done this for the school district. Simple, I think the last couple of times I've been here has either been to refinance some existing outstanding bonds or to for new money projects. But this time what we're going to do is prepay some of the district's bonds. So as you recall, probably over the last 5 years, the assessed valuation in the school district has gone up over 30%. So what we're seeing is an influx of cash at various school districts. I think I gave the example the other day. In my 30 years, probably you do one in a year. We're doing 11 this year for various school districts where their debt service funds have grown significantly because the last couple of years has seen an increase in assessed valuation. So that's what we're doing for the school district starting on March 1st, 2024. So what we're going to do is we're going to use some of the school district's funds, $2 million approximately, and we're going to use that to actually take that from Fund 3, the debt service fund, and prepay 2 maturities of the school district's bonds. We're going to prepay the $1,285,000 of the 2030 maturity and $715,000 of the 2029 maturity. Total interest amount saved by prepaying these early and not going to the call date is roughly $390,000. So we're going to prepay those on March 1st, 2024. The school district is going to send that money to the paying agent, UMB Bank, on February 1st, 2024. And by paying those 2 series, those 2 maturities of bonds, one in 2030 and one in 2029, early, 5 years early roughly, and 6 years in one case, you're going to save almost $400,000 by doing that. $390,506 to be exact. So I want to bring that to the board's attention, that will be taking place early part of next year, and ask for any questions and get your approval to move forward. So yes, so with your assessed valuation, it's based on your levy, and so with that increase in assessed valuation, which we usually estimate around 1.5% each year, so we've seen about 30% in growth. So we were estimating probably, and the school district was probably 6-7% over that period of time, and it's grown 30% over that time. So that brings, and your levy is still the same, so that brings an influx of cash more so than what you need to pay your existing bonds. So we're just using that excess cash to pay off some of your debt that's out there, some of your higher interest rate debt, because we have that extra cash there.
If I were sitting in the community, I would say, gosh, if we have excess money, why aren't we using it for something else? Why are we paying down bonds?
Because
Can you speak a little bit about that?
Yes, because it's in Fund 3. It's the GO, it's the debt service fund. Funds in the debt service fund can only be used to prepay bonds. And it's a dedicated fund. It's your debt service fund. It cannot be used for operational purposes or capital projects. It only can be used to pay principal and interest on outstanding general obligation bonds.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Other questions? Thank you, Mr. Boyd, for helping us be careful stewards of our resources. We appreciate it.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Item 3.02 are FY23 audited financial statements with Gina Cochran from KEB.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Gina Cochran, and I'm partner with KEB, Kerber, Eckenbreckel, here in St. Louis. This is the second year that I've been the partner on the engagement after Brian Wirtz stepped down from the partner. He took on a role to help out one of our offices in another city. He's still here in St. Louis, but he's splitting his time, so he had to let go of a few engagements. So I took that on a couple years ago. So here to go over a high-level review of your audit. It includes the 4 reports that should have been shared with the board. Last year, those were the majority of those were all combined into one report. We've got a separate financial statement this year, a separate federal report, and a separate internal control report this year. Just because of the timing of finding out that we really needed a federal audit, we split things up because we didn't know if we were going to get it done by this board meeting. So this summary goes over just high level of those financial statements. So management's responsible for the preparation and fair presentation of your financial statements, and those are prepared in accordance with the modified cash basis of accounting. And our duty under the audit is to express an opinion on those financial statements, including that state reporting packet, the federal reporting packet as well. So your audit's performed in accordance with generally accepted auditing standards, governmental auditing standards, and then also the uniform guidance because of that single audit. We issued an unmodified opinion on your financial statements, just those financial statements now that I'm talking about. That's the best of 3 opinions that we can issue, and it's also known as a clean opinion on your financial statements. So that's what you really want from us as auditors. In terms of internal control, we did issue an internal control letter. None of the items rose to the level of a significant deficiency or a material weakness. Those are the ones that are required to be reported to you all as the board charged with governance. But the superintendent, Dr. Jameson, asked for us to make sure we had everything full disclosure to the board and to the community. So we issued in writings or some internal control items that management should consider, and we'll go over those on this next slide here. So these were issued because we had some struggles this year in getting complete and accurate, timely information related to the audit. The most concerning one was the schedule of expenditures of federal awards was inaccurate when we received it. Initially, it was below the threshold requiring a single audit of $750, and with the added federal expenditures, it actually threw us over that $750,000. So last minute, we found out we had to have a single audit. So Chris jumped through hoops and we jumped through hoops and got that done. We didn't know that we were going to get it done. We actually just finished up testing on, Monday? So I appreciate your efforts in that.
So we've just put together some recommendations that the district, reconcile those federal expenditures, not only the general ledger to the disbursements, the expenditures on that schedule of expenditures of federal awards, but also reconcile it back to the DESI information in terms of the revenue. Because you report on a modified cash basis, there's always timing issues where you're receiving money from last year and the current year, so it gets very confusing to complete an accurate CFA for modified cash basis districts. So we're just recommending that take place. And then bank reconciliation. This one stemmed from my understanding that there's some issues, underlying issues with the accounting software and dealing with when things get voided, the reconciliation problem becomes a problem. So we're suggesting that the bank reconciliations, that obviously those are performed on a monthly basis, that there's validation that starting point is agreeing back to your bank balance, that someone's looking independently from the person who prepares that, is reviewing that reconciliation for long outstanding items, unusual items, and then lastly that ending balance agrees back to your general ledger, and that's probably the biggest key item, because if the general ledger doesn't agree with the bank statement and there's problems in your general ledger, our trial balance gets revised, which is what happened this year, so it caused some problems this year. And then transportation, just ensuring that there's accurate accumulation of data related to ridership that's reported to DESI. So compiling those spreadsheets in October and February as required by the state with ridership, someone independently reviewing that to ensure that underlying ridership data from the drivers agrees to the spreadsheet that's put together for us to audit. And then also that there's independent review that the reporting that goes to DESI related to the state transportation aid agrees then back to the supporting schedule. So just trying to buckle all that down just a little bit. And Chris and Dr. Jameson and I talked about that pretty thoroughly last week or early this week as well. So in terms of your financial statements, in terms of compliance with laws, regulations, grants, and contracts, we did have a state reporting item this year related to material non-compliance. We had an issue with the budgetary and disbursement procedures whereby three of the four different funds in your financial statements, your actual expenditures exceeded the budgeted expenditures that were approved by the board, so that creates a finding. So we reported that in the state reporting package as finding 2023-01. So just making sure then a recommendation below that is that management of the district monitors those expenditures, especially close to end of year, and that they're bringing any needed or necessary amendments to the board and or controlling expenditures at the end of the year to stay in line with that budget if the board is not going to amend those, the budget. This next slide is over your federal awards, that single audit that I talked about. So we audited the child nutrition cluster and also Head Start. We issued an unmodified opinion. Again, that is the best opinion that you can get. It's a clean opinion. We had no material weaknesses in that single audit, which is great, and no significant deficiencies noted. Also, no audit findings related to uniform guidance that would require reporting. This next slide is over state compliance. So again, this is just a repeat of we're looking at and required by DESI to look at your state budgetary and disbursements, also then attendance and also transportation. So then repeating that we had that issue related to the expenditures exceeding budget. So that resulted in a qualified opinion. And what that means is the only issue we identified in your state reporting requirements that didn't meet the requirements was that budget, those actual expenditures exceeding your budget. So And then these last couple of slides go over some required communication just that we have to have with the board every year, indicating that our significant accounting policies for the district, those are in Note A to your financial statements. The most significant is the fact that you're preparing your financial statements on that modified cash basis of accounting. We had no new policies adopted in the current year, so if you would pick up your financial statements from last year, compare them to this year, you're comparing apples to apples. There are no changes in those policies. No transactions lacked authoritative guidance, meaning that you are following that modified cash basis of accounting, and all of your financial statement disclosures were neutral, consistent, and clear. This last, it's not the last slide, this slide, just we're required to disclose with the board and management any significant deficiencies, or I'm sorry, any difficulties encountered in the audit. So just repeating there that we had difficulties getting complete and accurate timely information in the audit, which we've already discussed. So that resulted in extra time and the delay in the federal program and us kind of jumping through hoops at the end of the game there to try to get that done. But again, appreciate Chris and his team's help with that. We had no disagreements with management. We've complied with all ethical requirements to remain independent from the school district. That's required, or we couldn't issue our independent auditor's report. The financial statements, there were no misstatements this year that were detected, but again, because of the cash issue we had, a lot of the information in the financial statements in terms of cash and expenditures had to get changed because of the expenditure, the cash reconciliation issue. So we just imported a new trial balance instead of making a large journal entry. Significant risks in your audit. All audits have risk, and we are required, that's a new disclosure that came about 2 years ago, I believe. Management doesn't need to do anything about these risks. It's just where we look and do more procedures in our audit. So the only one that we have there is management override of controls. Those could be operating perfectly look to be operating perfectly, but management has so much control over that they can circumvent the controls that are in place. And that is also a required audit risk in all audits. So you can't really do anything to ever get rid of this risk. If you saw 2 or 3 or 4 risks here in your audit, then you might have some concerns and you might want to talk with management or have more conversation. But again, that's required to be a risk under our professional standards. Also, management provided us with a management representation related to approval of the financial statements. In that letter, it just means that the financial statements are complete and accurate. They're giving us the representation that is such, and then also that the disclosures are accurate and nothing was withheld from us as auditors in our audit. To our knowledge, there was no management consultation with other independent accountants. That typically only happens if there's a new standard and management might disagree with us, or something that's difficult in your financial statements and they don't agree with how we're proposing handling it, or we differ, so management might reach out to another CPA firm. In that case, the CPA firm would have to come back to us, make sure they understand all the facts and circumstances, and then we'd have to talk about it and make sure we came to an agreement with, their opinion versus our opinion. So, in conclusion, just wanted to thank Chris, Dr. Jameson, and the rest of the staff and the board for the assistance during the audit, and also for having KEB as your auditors over the years. Any questions on what I covered or the reports, if you had time to read those?
I have a question.
Sure.
So you mentioned that management circumvention of controls.
Mm-hmm.
If we went ahead and there was an overage and then we did do an amendment, is that the type of thing that you're talking about? Would it be better to have would it be better to reflect the inconsistency than it would be to go ahead and amend to allow for the over expenditure.
That's really not what I'm talking about, but I think that's a board decision, because if the board doesn't agree that you should amend the budget, then management should stick within the budget that the board has developed. I'm more talking about, for an example, this is not the case with the district, but a lot of organizations or districts have, just for an example again, a requirement whereby a certain threshold of a check requires two signatures and the board. So Chris might say, never has, I understand, but he might say, I'm not going to go through these hoops. I can't get a board signature or a board approval and second signature. I'm going to break this invoice up into two payments to circumvent that control and pay them $10,000 and $10,000 instead of the $20,000 threshold requiring those requirements. So the internal control is there, but management overrode it. And typically, there would be collusion whereby two people would know about it and probably inform to make that happen, or not inform to make that internal control, be circumvented. So, and again, that's just an example.
I was just going to say, that is an example.
That is an example. We did not identify any of that. And so there's a test called the Benford test, where actually you can take all of your checks that you ever pay out of an entity for a year, and you run what's called a Benford test, and you should have a certain curve based on the disbursements, and if there's peaks and valleys in that, that sometimes is an indication of a circumvention. And we did that several years ago on every client as an unpredictable procedure, just to look for, that sort of thing. So every year we have to do an unpredictable procedure, so.
I will say that I also asked that question repeatedly, because when I saw that, I was alarmed, and I said, how do we fix it? And I asked again, how do we fix it? She said, it's not something we can fix. Right. So, but there was, the way that I initially read it, I thought that it was something that we needed to fix, but she indicated that it's something that will continue to be in the audits.
Yeah. Yeah, initially I didn't have the bullet points below that, but I put them in just to clarify that, there's nothing you have to do. It's a required risk for all audits.
It's essentially, there are bad actors in this world that may try to do shady things.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And usually those things are either, like I said, two people, or it's found out when somebody's on vacation and somebody else steps into their role. So
I'm just curious, in all the, if you have other districts that you provide the audit for, are they cash basis or are they accrual? And what do you tend to recommend? Does that change anything, and just from your experience?
We've got a good mix. A lot of our smaller school districts are modified cash basis. A lot of our larger school districts are full GAAP basis financial statements, full accrual. It costs more, and it's more timely to do an audit for a full accrual. In terms of risks, there's more risks in typically in a full accrual basis of accounting, one specifically being revenue recognition, because of getting it in the books in the right time period, so your cutoff is a big issue. It's really a district choice. For your size, I would say that it's very common to have modified cash basis.
And I will put in the next board note, I did receive some information looking at surrounding districts to indicate which ones were modified and which ones were full accrual. So we have several, and Chris and I did have a conversation about that to see what the determining factor was. So I will provide those to the agency.
And it sounds like administration's already got this covered, but not bringing an amendment to the board created more problems. And so we'd like to avoid that in the future.
Yeah.
So feel free to bring amendments so that we can fix the budget before it goes.
Yeah.
Before the outside consultant.
Also, on another note with the modified cash basis versus full accrual, DESE, they want you to keep your books on that cash or modified cash basis of accounting. So typically your fund financial statements would be then on a different basis as your top level governmental wide financial statements. So it does create a lot of headache trying to get DESA reports reconciled to the fund financial statements, and then the other. So it complicates it. If you don't have to do it, I wouldn't.
So we have already talked about corrective action in regards to addressing the recommendations that are included, and that will come in January when we give a financial update. And that will also give us time to look at other districts. I did ask for exemplars in regards to some of the items that were listed. So as we are a district of continuous improvement, the goal is to identify best practice and implement those within the context of MRH. So you will see something come back to the board in January.
Any other questions? All right, great. Thank you for your time. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chris.
Item 3.03, our construction update.
Switch gears here. So change orders this month are related to materials escalation, specifically for our concrete. We needed to add some intercom and access controls to our beautiful new building that's almost complete over here. Some grills. We changed some ceilings, so we had to do some different grills and diffusers in our weight room. We did add some pickleball game lines to our gym floor. Dr. Dietrich assures me that we're going to earn this money back through facility rentals, since pickleball is apparently the fastest growing sport in the country, the world. Yes. So that was our deal. And these are not being paid from construction funds. These are coming out of the operations budget, but they are included in the contract work, so we have to list them here. And then also there was some range control wiring that we needed to complete, and we did extend the contract out, and these are the general conditions in order to do that. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, I would also add to that there were several change orders that were proposed that we worked through to navigate that we were able to not push through because they were fine with those were included in our contract already. So we're already seeing benefits from the partnership with Navigator.
Chris, can you expound upon a little bit the change order 315R1, just so that community can have an idea of the why behind that when they look at the expenditures under the warrant list?
Sure. The notes in the architectural drawings and specifications spec'd an intercom call system in each classroom. So when you are a subcontractor and you are going through said specifications and bidding on a job, you look for the word classroom. If you don't see the word classroom, you don't schedule for an intercom to be there. So what we found was there were some rooms that were called, for instance, there's a space in the new alternative services area that is called gathering. Well, the gathering is an educational space. It's effectively a classroom. It will function as a classroom a large majority of the time. It did not have an intercom scheduled to be in there, so we learned that in this space, and when we did the renovation in this space, and then we proactively looked at the plans to make sure that we had the appropriate life safety devices in all of our classrooms, regardless of what we called them on the plans. And then the feedback to our architect was, let's be consistent about what we're calling things, or make sure that at least we're calling those things out in the notes if we're going to move away from the language of classroom. So and that essentially in a nutshell is this change order.
We have no other questions. We'll move on to item 3.04, which is our follow-up to the middle school seat-to-table proposal from last week.
Good evening, everyone. We are excited to bring back to you the updates for the seat to table and then the following Math 6, 7, and 7, 8 course questions and feedback. So what I did, you'll notice in the board docs, is I took the questions that came up during our last board meeting, tried to address each one of those in its own slide, and then put that sort of at the top, if you will, of the slide deck, so that way you had also the reference material at the bottom. So I'm going to briefly go through that, and then I asked Mr. Zitzer to join us here this evening in case there are any specific middle school logistics questions to be a part of that. So taking a look at these 6 questions, I'll go through here. Obviously, you can read in depth each of them, but budgets and like-sized districts. I kept the districts anonymous, but like-size means right around our enrollment. And you see that we are over budgeting this first year based on the region, but we think we will right size in years to come. And we think the first year is just going to have startup costs. We're just going to eventually right size into that, and we can see what that looks like as we reached out to our neighboring districts. The Seed to Table course does not require a FACS certification, but Ms. Bree Parks is really excited about receiving that additional certification. So what that looks like is basically the first, after a person receives their teacher certification, they can just basically sign up online for a test and take that either online or in person at a testing agency, and it will be over these 4 areas of human development and relationships, resource management and consumer skills, nutrition and foods, and workplace skills and careers. So it'll be exciting to have that additional certification here within our staff. Another attachment on this is the 23-24 middle school course selection sheet. I attached this because I wanted you to get a feeling for what kids get to see. This allows students to be able to have an opportunity to take a look at what the course offerings are and how they make the selection of selecting to take the new middle school Seed to Table course as well as the other options that are available to them. This will be during the elective block, so there's no scheduling impact, and it does diversify the content, so a student will not have to potentially take the same course more than once, which is a goal for us. Reading, writing, and math integration, we are definitely working on those. We're excited about utilizing the nonfiction writing strategies that are being used within our middle school ELA courses and providing real-life examples of those within our Seed to Table course. We do see that potentially this will impact the garden integration in other courses, and a lot of times we hope that we'll take those best projects and integrate them here into the Seed to Table course, but then also support teachers at looking at ways to get them into the gardens throughout the year. And that ends my little update based on those questions. If you have any further questions, I will be glad to answer them, or volley them over to Mr. Switzer to answer when he gets here. Any other questions for our Seed to Table?
And to the next course proposal, 3.05 for the Math 6, 7, and 7, 8.
Okay. Well, luckily, I also asked Ms. Elam to join us as well, just in case there were some questions that I could not answer related to Math 6, 7 and Math 7, 8. So Mr. Zitzer and Ms. Elam are both here to check and make sure. So we had 8 questions related to that. I want to give you those quick updates. This is a lot of words on the slide that basically says we have a communication plan. We intend to not only communicate with students, but also families, and have already begun to draft out what that looks like to make sure that there's a clear communication and that this is an option and an opportunity for students. We did actually reach out to districts that offer this course, and what was interesting, I quoted the reply. I kept the district anonymous just so I didn't put anybody's stuff out there. If you will. But it was interesting, they were excited about the 6, 7, and then the curriculum coordinator felt that there wasn't enough alignment, so they took those 7, 8 course apart in that district. Overall, you can see that students enroll in both of those courses and have seen success with that. Flexibility with entry points is making sure that we have a team that constantly has an opportunity to look for those students, to actively find those students and provide them with challenging content through this course opportunity. The question was kind of related to how does this impact ECC? So there's no current changes to programming in ECC. And then you'll notice down on the bottom, what I wanted to give you is just 23-24 for for first grade and second grade. So that's this year in performance on the fall STAR early childhood math assessment. So you can kind of see the raw numbers of the number of students and where they're currently trending in their math acquisition as assessed by the STAR assessment, which is our district benchmarking tool. The winter benchmark happened like days ago, so bringing that data in a timely fashion would not have been able to be here today, but you will definitely see that in the coming months and weeks. What happens to the students who are in third and fourth? You can see that we have a phase-out model. So I did a little screenshot. You can kind of see how the teachers and administrators are working to phase out the old system and integrate in the new system, which I was impressed that they were already thinking about that, even before the question was asked at the last board meeting, because they were, oh, we already have that, here you go. So I took a little screenshot and integrated that in there. There's a question on how many students are doubling up for math at high school. We can see that it is a considerable number. It's not a insignificant number that students that are doubling up. So I do want to bring attention to this, that this is something that will benefit us in the coming days, that we won't have to see students enrolling in this number of doubled up courses. It was also interesting that we have 24 eighth graders enrolled in Algebra 1 already, and that's also a considerable number, knowing that our community and our kids are, even though the path may not be seamless, they are going through the extra steps to get to Algebra 1 in eighth grade. So we hope that this will lighten the load for that along the way. We currently do have capacity to make all these things work. There will be a rough year with an additional number of preps as the phase out happens this upcoming year. But the teachers that both Ms. Weaver and Ms. Mejan are ready for that one rough year to make sure that they can provide this opportunity for kids for the future. And if there are any additional questions, I will do my best to answer and also ask for support from my two colleagues.
I have a general question about the AP system. So are these changes kind of with that in mind to get people prepared to enroll in AP, or what do you have to do to get enrolled in AP? Is that something like anybody can do? You just have to pass it as long as you're in it, or?
Yeah, so to enroll in the AP class, you have to be AP trained. And your course has to be aligned to AP standards. So there's a number of things that have to take place before that. Oftentimes an AP course requires a prerequisite of some kind. AP courses are great. They're not required. You can do a calculus course that is not AP, but it is often seen as the model for us to provide opportunities for teachers.
Can I ask a clarifying question, Josh? Are you talking teacher level or student level?
I'm talking student level.
Yes.
Like,
okay.
Is the goal, and I'm sorry if I was clear, is the goal with changing this so that we have a clear path to have kids do algebra in 8th grade in order to sort of get them prepared for AP, or is it just, that's just one more avenue?
It's just another avenue. It is truly opens doors. That's the key that we want. We are not pushing everyone into AP, but we also want it to be accessible for kids without having to do the extenuating circumstances of summer courses, doubling up on math classes in order to achieve their goals.
So for the course sequence, you can take algebra and some of the other courses, geometry, calculus. You don't have to take the AP portion. So for me, it's two things. One, as we begin to talk about access, it opens the door and decreases the number of courses that students have to take in high school. And I learned that last year during my lunch bunch, because I had some students who were frustrated that either they could not take the course, and then some who were not quite ready to take algebra in 8th grade, which then would have forced them to actually take double up courses. To the second part of the question that I don't think you asked is about access and increasing, for me, diversity of students in AP classes. So Dr. McGee and Ms. Huffman attended Equal Opportunity School event maybe last week, And that particular event looks at particular metrics to see how we identify students who may not necessarily show the level of aptitude, but have persistence to be able to experience success. And they have a survey that they complete, which includes whether or not there are adults in the building who believe that the student can be successful. So we are looking at both of those, but this one particularly is looking at decreasing the number of students who are actually having to double up, particularly for secondary. And I would say for elementary, it allows teachers to be more intentional around delivery of instruction when you have vast skill levels for students.
Oh, and just to follow up with that, I also like recently learned, I guess there is a program for students to take college credit. Do you have to be enrolled in like I mean, can you just sort of pick and choose? Can you like, okay, I am now ready for this math, instead of taking AP, I can go take a community college course, that kind of thing? Or is it, do you have to be like all of it?
I'm going to step in. We're talking about math in middle school and elementary. You're talking about all the opportunities that are in high school for this. You're talking about early college. You're talking about AP.
Right.
That's a whole nother proposal that we could spend. I want you to have
question,
that information.
I guess my whole question about it is whether or not the whole point of this is to get them
No, it's
into.
to open. So as a parent who had kids who've had to double up and take stuff over the summer, this is to open the doors for kids that have the capacity to move at a different speed in math and be able to have more doors open. You don't have to, it can help you get to an honors or an AP, but I'm so thrilled. I can't tell you how difficult it was to have kids who are doubling up or kids who had to do summer school or summer on their own, teaching themselves how to do the math so that they could take algebra.
Okay, and I guess that's just my point, is I just wanted to make it clear like why this was a good idea.
Yeah, no, I'm in full support of this idea, if you want to
Okay.
figure it out.
Yeah, and I'll end with this. This is our high school course guide. It recently shifted to online, which is very exciting. But in addition to this, it does lay out, as you can kind of see. Now imagine being able to push all that back. And we don't have 4 options in 12th grade. We can have some more doors at which to open for me and for our students. So excited for this as an opportunity.
Yeah, I'm appreciating just kind of, we asked a lot of questions last month, and I appreciate Dr. McGee and the principals and the teacher level folks for preparing a second presentation to us after the first. It does, I think many of the questions are sort of pointing towards some of our education equity questions as well. And so, I think we're, without explicitly calling that out, getting at like who is impacted by this, who is gonna benefit from this, and perhaps continuing to be more explicit about that. I do think to Josh's point, we several years ago did get some data about like who is actually getting access to the early college, to the AP sort of thing. And I think that is data we need to keep an eye on if we're truly living into our commitment to education opportunities for all kids. And again, we do need to stay at a level of letting the experts do their work. So I'm just noodling on a little bit of like what sort of values are we expressing here that we just want to say like these are the things that are the framework, and we trust y'all to give us a presentation and courses that fit within that values framework, because I think we're sort of dancing around that space, but that maybe is a goal for us in the coming year.
Thank you.
Thank you. We'll move on to item 4.01, which is our MSIP 6 marketing feature survey data.
Hey. Good morning, everybody. In preparing for this presentation, I was really cognizant of the fact that, well, first of all, thank you, one of the Chris's, for running my presentation, so thank you for that ahead of time. I was cognizant of the fact that This is just a presentation about where we're at today with climate and culture survey data. We're always going to wrestle with this stuff and ask questions and learn more about it. But I did want to share with you, it's a good stopping point to kind of like give you some overall district, like Dr. Jameson, to 30,000 feet results about how the survey results came in. So you can go to the next slide, Chris. So again, the climate culture survey is connected to something that DESE asked us to do. It is connected to MSIP and CSIP requirements, but it's also best practice. It's to really ask our stakeholders how I feel about this place. How do you feel about this place where you decided to send your children and to live? And so it's really kind of good best practice. It is evidence-based. We did choose a tool that has been around for 20 plus years. We used the PBIS survey. It was developed and tweaked to meet MSIP standards, so it was evidence-based. The survey we used did explicitly ask about student voice. It asked the students about student voice, and it asked the parents about student voice, and it asked the staff about it. And that was explicitly asked for in this survey. We will have precision about what to do with the data besides sharing it with you tonight. We do have to share that with our stakeholders, but beyond just saying, hey, this is what we learned, see you later, we hope to do something with this data, send it to the buildings, give it to committees, attach it to our strategic plan, and we'll talk about that a little bit. Climate and culture, I did borrow this from Dr. Jameson, so thank you, Dr. Jameson, from last year's. But climate is really kind of about feel, you know, and how the place feels and the behaviors and attitudes that the kind of the kids are bringing to the space. And culture has more to do with how we do things. What are some of the processes and practices that we have here at MRH? Just to kind of give you a quick description, some of you took the survey, I think. It did use a Likert scale. Give an opt-out, which I think sometimes people were like, they didn't love that because there were some questions that were maybe hard to answer. I think for some of the parents, like, I'm not really sure about that. But it did force folks to kind of take a position, which generally gave us pretty good data to work with. The elementary student survey is the only Likert scale is a little bit different. They rate themselves, never, sometimes, often, always. But the other surveys were strongly disagree, some would agree, and strongly agree. So that's the scoring guide. We got the results. So this is kind of what I liked about the PBIS tool is it was simple, straightforward. We own the data, and we were able to kind of work with it right away. We didn't have to deal with a third-party vendor. It didn't cost us any money. Our outstanding coordinator of data assessment and accountability, Rachel, helped me put together the information. It kind of ran off Excel queries, which isn't the most sophisticated system, but it really did meet our needs. We were able to generate stuff pretty quickly, which I really liked. When we ran the data, it kind of color-coded scores. So again, on the 4-point scale, anything above a 3.2 is green, that's a celebration. Between 2.0, 3.2, which is a pretty wide margin, is yellow, which is kind of a growth opportunity. And red is a significant concern. We had not one single item in red on any of the surveys as a pattern, which was a good, kind of a good celebration. We did have some scores in the yellow and green, a lot of things to celebrate, some things to kind of maybe grow on. So that's kind of like a little bit of the color coding. Go ahead, Chris. What I loved about this is our participation rates almost across the board were significantly higher, both particularly with staff and with families, and with some of our students when compared to last fall. The elementary went up 13%. The students in the middle school went up about 13%. High school is about the same. Family almost tripled. We only had 12.6% of our families respond last year. We hit almost 37%, which I think is a pretty good response rate. Now, with the families, I don't think it represented the demographics of this community, so that's a growth opportunity. But in terms of overall numbers, we did have more participation, which gave us more data to kind of work with. And with the staff, the participation rate was much higher as well. 40% last year, 2/3 this year. So I thought that the data was more meaningful for us because we had better participation rates. Those are the 4 components of school climate and culture surveys around safety, both physical and social emotional relationships. Are people connected to their teachers? Are parents connected to their staff? Are students connected to each other? It's a big part of it. Also teaching and learning, because at the end of the day, schools are about, that's the business, really. We want people to be happy here and safe and beautiful space, but they also have to learn and be able to teach here. It's a big component of these surveys. How is the environment? Is the design really acclimated to instruction? And are you really assessing stuff? Are you looking at data to kind of track how you're doing both in climate and culture? So those are 4 key components of climate and culture that are connected to our strategic plan and are part of the survey. And then here's some of the results. The staff survey was, I thought, pretty strong. Like we had 5 areas that were in the green, about connecting with each other. That was a top score. They thought that they really were cognizant of student voice. They thought the environment and space that this district has given them to teach and work with has been strong, safe place. A couple of growth areas. Probably the biggest growth area was data sharing and around climate and culture. It's a 2.8. And the other 3 areas that were growth were right on the cusp of, a celebration. They're pretty close. So that was the staff survey summary. Go ahead, Chris. Family survey also strong. In terms of relationships and safety and adults respecting their student voice, teaching and learning, all really strong. Again, barely under a 3.2 for sharing climate data, but we're doing it tonight. And then the parent involvement was interesting because there were several questions about that, about do you volunteer at your kid's school, but there was also do you go to parent-teacher conferences, those kind of things. And those all kind of figured into the parent involvement score. And the student survey probably had the most growth opportunities. I was encouraged by the fact that our students felt strongly that they have an adult that they can talk to in this building. I thought that's really important, and in a small school that should be the case, but I was glad to see that that was the case for us. And that they felt that this place is setting high standards for achievement and wants them to be successful. Those are 2 pretty good things to celebrate about climate and culture. There were a lot of growth opportunities around kind of general, if I was to summarize them, around behavior, relationships, liking school. If you go to the next slide, Chris. Can teachers teach? Are their behaviors kind of interfering with classroom instruction? That was an area of concern. And the lowest score was I like school, which I'm like, well, that's not great. But that was literally the question, do you like school? What was interesting about that is the 3rd graders really like school. But they're more sort of like a general decline. And I guess if I had to think about my own school experience, I probably would have said I like school in 3rd grade. I'm not sure when I was in 12th grade that I would have answered I like school. I'm not sure. But there were some developmental trends there. But something for us to unpack at the building level for sure. Next steps, sharing data with building leaders. So Red did send out those reports to all the building leaders. Item analysis, much more detailed about who responded. We're going to try to align that with our management oversight team with the strategic plan. It's a good opportunity, one of the procedures that we think it could be meaningful. We've already shared with our MTSS team. What I loved about this survey, which I didn't realize, is we're currently using a screener, SRSS-IE, which is teacher-driven in terms of assessing our students. But it was nice to have the climate culture survey with some student voice because they were able to talk about their experience. Now, they're anonymous surveys, but at least it gives us an overall sense of things we can do at the tier 1 level. So it's so Lauren's like, give me that stuff. So we sent that to her already. Kind of coordinate the data with some attendance and discipline as a way to kind of really unpack some of those things. And what I would add, which I thought about since I made this presentation, was really sharing it with the student leader teams, because the student data was where our most growth opportunities are. So Katie and Abraham and those guys, I'd like to share that with them and unpack that with them. We also have a new family community engagement committee, and I want to kind of unpack both the family survey data with that group, but also really talk about how we can get more people to participate in these kind of initiatives. And I think that's all I had. Again, this is just a snapshot today. So I think the buildings will come back with more deep dive, more information about their buildings and how they kind of hope to address some of those concerns and growth areas. Any questions? And I think we'll use this tool again, I think probably for a couple of years to kind of get some momentum, some kind of apples to apples and some baseline data. So.
Sorry, this is our meeting. Public comment is attended.
Sorry, Jamie. Yeah, I'll tell you afterwards. It's good to see you. It's an alum. Yeah, how are you doing, Jamie? Any other questions from the board?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So this establishes a baseline from which to take action.
Mm-hmm.
And you've talked about some specific ways that building leaders and oversight teams are going to use this data. Can you give us some specific examples of how they're going to be processing through that data and looking for ways to apply?
Well, I think probably the first thing was, because they've got detailed item analysis. So, for example, if there was an area about can teachers teach? So unpack to kind of address that and to kind of see about, like, for example, there was a question about do our staff recognize students for good behaviors? Okay, that would kind of got mixed scores. And then we can look about our strategies about how we do that in each one of our buildings. What do we currently have in place for that? Do we do anything? Can we track things and do some measurement about that? So those kind of things, I would say.
I can jump in for that. So today is Thursday. Yesterday, I met with the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education supervisor that's responsible for supporting the district around our APR scores. And so part of this is not only that we look at the data at the district level, but it also includes us disaggregating and showing with the state how we actually use the data, and that report is actually due in January. So we look at data in our cabinet or COA meetings, and so another part of this, as Vince mentioned, is disaggregating the data further to disseminate it to the individuals on my cabinet that would be responsible for addressing that within the strategic plan. For me, we do data dives with principals, and so now that this data is available, those are the conversations that I have with them, and it is not an easy conversation. So if you were to ask principals, I do ask hard questions. We do ask what strategies they plan to put in place for the data that they have, and not only for climate and culture, but also for academic achievement data. So we do look at multiple data points. But for me, this is one that I have been reflecting upon, because when I look at the survey data and it says we don't share climate and culture survey data, that one for me, I'm still trying to unpack. And so thinking about potentially doing focus groups and some of those things, and then we create action steps and the schools do the same as well. And so the data is used, is reviewed, and I believe the middle school currently is using last year's survey, some of the questions, and there are some crosswalks and parallels, and they give those surveys to students to track each month to see how the students are reporting whether or not they feel safe. So while the survey is different from last year, that was a question last year around safety. And when I was actually debriefing with Vince, I said, oh, that one actually fits in sense of belonging, which was last year's survey around whether or not they had a trusted adult. So while the language is not necessarily the same, some of the items that are actually surfacing are. And so we are a continuous improvement district. That information is used for every decision that we make. I'll give another example. Last year, the data that was shared from the climate and culture survey, particularly around bullying and feeling safe in school at the elementary level, was an item that surfaced, and the board approved to actually purchase bullying curriculum as a part of second step with our social emotional learning curriculum. So it is an ongoing use of data. It's not this one time. We share the data, we revisit the data, and actually the buildings all have building leadership teams, which are cross sections of people in their building. So they review this information with their buildings, they make adjustments and changes in their buildings, and they also all have building school improvement plans with goals, action steps, and those are actually tracked as well. So this is not a one point in time piece of data. It is ongoing. We do continue to look at it and make adjustments as we go through. So.
And like working with supporting students, you would identify some high leverage areas where you can make a difference, be specific about an intervention, you want to improve that area, and then take some data afterwards. And hopefully when we do the spring survey or next fall, we'll have some improvement in some of those areas, I think.
Yeah, Mr. Starr, I have a question. Will we be taking the survey again at some point this year?
Yeah, in the spring.
And are there any conversations or plans in place to increase the high school participation in the survey? Because it seemed like that was the weakest point. I think
Yeah, it wasn't bad. I think Ms. Hoffman and I have some ideas about it. I think probably actually I'd love to hear from the student leadership group about that. My hypothesis is if we identified, we did kind of rush it this year a little bit, and we didn't create as much time. So I think as a district, I think we'll do a better job identifying a date. And I think if we picked a academic lab or time where everyone's here, everyone take a deep breath, open up your computers and do the survey, I think we'll probably get a pretty big jump in that too. I think that's an easy fix, actually. And the participation wasn't bad, yeah.
Kind of to piggyback off that, is there any idea like how or why more families got involved in the survey this time?
Well, I'm going to ask some of the families at a committee. The ones I spoke to said we did a pretty good job reminding them about it, and they also thought it was an easier survey to fill out. It was more, they thought it was a simpler one to fill out. It wasn't so tedious. And I thought it was, and I took the staff and I thought, oh, this took me 6 minutes. Like, I think people felt like, I think there were some questions on the family survey that were a little bit funky, like, I'm not really sure about that, and I have to answer to continue. But I think it was a more straightforward, easier survey to fill out. And I think it got us the information we needed too. So
I will also add that the Vince and Ed actually had some conversation with Rachel around how we might improve participation for our families of color.
Mhm.
And so we have found that that continues to be an opportunity. And it also still is an opportunity for male figures to actually take the survey.
Mhm.
So particularly, most of our surveys are completed, if you think proportionally, and I believe we have that data.
We do.
And we can share it in the board note,
Mhm.
that our white female parents, family members are taking the surveys. And when we looked at the proportional rates based on our enrollment, we still have some work to do in
Yes.
thinking about how do we do that so that we're not causing harm. So we spent a great deal of time talking about that. I would love to see that number at 100%. I would love to see the number for students much higher, because we're still continuing to see some pieces when we begin to talk about student culture that we need to continue to work on.
Just a point of clarification, the ECC students did not take the survey. It's grades 3 through 12.
And I would say I'm happy. I think the second graders last year did, and the survey results were not beneficial because it was like always sometimes or something like that. And I was like, yeah, that's what a second grader would say.
Yeah.
So, but I do think we got some pretty good data to begin to think about as we
Yeah.
look at supports. And we are also having conversations with our partners to see what additional supports we can put in place as well.
Yeah. All right, thank you for your time. I know you guys got a long agenda, so I'll go ahead.
Thank you.
See you guys.
Item 4.02, construction fee.
Thank you. So we are at that point in the project nearing completion where things are changing very, very fast. Dr. McGee is going to put up the slideshow, go through some items real quick. The pictures that you will be seeing here are even out of date. I took some pictures yesterday afternoon that look completely different today. That's how quickly things are moving. But we're getting ready to start on the gym floor. We have almost all surfaces completely painted. We have the majority of the carpet is down. We have furniture in offices. It's not yet placed, but it is in the offices. We have seating arriving in the next few weeks. This is our new roof. This is actually the existing gym roof. I thought I'd take a picture of it anyway. It looks so nice. This is our SSC space. This is the gathering space that I referred to earlier. It is now complete, so what you can see is a fully painted wall and skylights and ceiling grid. Mike and I were in there yesterday when the lights came on this floor. It was pretty exciting while we were standing there. It was dark and that was light. It was pretty amazing. Those skylights are amazing, by the way. They bring in a lot of natural light. The 40-ton water meter vault is now in place. We're waiting on Missouri American Water to install later, but we do have our the basketball goals are now complete. We're waiting that floor. They have a very methodical approach to this. The iron workers were outside this morning erecting the canopy steel. We've got the courtyard. The pavers are almost complete. On and on and on. We are at the final stages of this project. The Trike will be turning over portions of it next week for the operations crew to begin cleaning and waxing. We will start moving into the spaces when we return from winter break. We have don't let me kid you, we have a long way to go, but things are moving very quickly and they have a tendency to change daily, and we will get this project done and it's going to be amazing. And what did our partner at Navigate say? These spaces would be grand?
Grander.
Grander.
These spaces are just going to be grander.
Yes. When you walk into once you have the opportunity to tour the completed space, when you walk into the new Building A, the student services area, it will take your breath away. It's going to be pretty amazing. Tall ceilings, natural light, lots of windows and glass. We have colors tying throughout. So the design on this particular project is phenomenal, and we are very pleased with that. Now we just got to get it done.
And I would add, we are very excited about these to be learning spaces. But excitingly, it already became a learning space today. We didn't see one of our alumni who's at Rankin, who was an architect student, graduated last year, Lily Watkins, reached out and said, hey, I'm in architecture. I really appreciate the learning opportunity to walk the space. So I had the opportunity to walk the space with her today, and just the questions she was giving, and it was a really neat experience to already see before we open that it has become a learning space for one of our alumni.
I would also like to say publicly just thank you to Dr. Dietrich since he's come on operations. He's been joining in and assisting with the construction management duties, and it's been phenomenal to have a partner in that. There are days and times when that work is overwhelming and difficult to complete along with other priority tasks, but being able to have a partner in this to say, hey, can you cover this for me today because I'm slammed, has been phenomenal. So I do appreciate the partnership. So thank you.
Item 4.03, Prop E progress update. Just finish this.
This is just going to be a moving version of what you just saw. But, the progress is, you're going to see a lot of new stuff. Just put it that way. It's really easy now to envision what the courtyard is ultimately going to become. Those are really long steps, but looks like a seating surface as well to me. And that is going to be a walkway that's right in the front of Lohmeyer's, you can see. Notice how the new construction mirrors the red brick on top and the lighter colored stones on the bottom. So it's not the same stones, obviously, but the theme remains the same. And this is the really neat part. This is the gymnasium, where they were listening to Wham, apparently. Wasn't expecting that. This is the main floor, I guess the ground level floor in Building A. You got door frames in, like you got cabinets going in. That is going to be, I guess, the reception area right inside. The desk is in. This is looking down into that floor. This is at the top on the third floor. Floor to ceiling glass everywhere. And then, of course, the colors are going in. There's one of the skylights that Chris was talking about. We've got basins about to go in as well, up on the third floor. That's the view, another floor to ceiling window. We're in the basement now, where the blue dominates instead of the green. So. That would be the weight room. Yeah. The mirrors on the wall give. So. Lockers ready to go in, and you're getting close when the water fountains are. There's my ode to flash dance. That's it. Thank you.
Item 4.07, collective bargaining update. Oh, I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. I cursed ahead pretty far. Okay, let's go back. Sorry, y'all. Item 4.04, let's do our program evaluation for gifted services.
Dan, did you think you were getting away?
This is my last thing before break.
Yes, we tried to give Dan the night off by saying that I would give the gifted program evaluation, but Dan was like, no way, I'm coming. So thank you so much for being here. I appreciate you taking time.
I like talking about our program. I'm proud of it. My name is Dan Lyons. I am the gifted teacher for 3rd through 6th grade. I'm one of 3 people. Crystal Sabota works with the 1st graders, and Amy Kruger works with the 7th, 8th, and high school students. And so we come to you every year as part of how this is set up as a program evaluation. So this is our yearly visit. As you saw in our program overview, the big things to take away from this is that we believe that academically gifted students come from various backgrounds. And that's very, very important for us. It's something that we are looking into, and how does that look for us? Those things we're constantly working at. When you think of our program, think of it as it is an intervention. It's considered in some areas a tier 2 intervention. A tier 1 would be straight classroom. Tier 2 is students get pulled out for additional help that maybe the Tier 1 classroom can't support. So within our program, we focus on the unique social and emotional needs of the students. We allow students to create open-ended activities, allow them to have a say and an ownership in their learning. Sometimes these activities are a bit more complex and more abstract in their thinking. Our work is connected to our district strategic plan, goals 1, 2, and 3. So a current update on our current goals. Now this was something we were having a hard time with, so you guys aren't because you're much smarter than I am, but our current goals are technically last year's goals. And so after tonight we made new goals for ourselves. So these are what our goals that we have been working on. We had 3. Our first goal was kind of our really biggest goal that we were working on. We looked at how we were identifying our initial screening process of our students. Our big screening happens with all first graders and all students who are new to the district from 2 through 6 are also part of the screening process. Historically, the screening process included academic-only assessments. Through discussion, we felt like we were missing a large portion of students. So we're saying that if we're screening our students, then they're just going to be academically high and nothing else. We don't necessarily agree with that. We included the CAP, which is the Creativity Assessment Packet, which all students participate. It's a nonverbal creativity test. In the past, we used one that dealt with writing. We would scribe for students who needed support. This is the drawing pictures and responding to prompts. The Naglieri General Ability Test is a newer test. If you're familiar with these, an older version would be the NNAT instead of the NNGAT, which was a Naglieri Nonverbal Ability Test. What's exciting about this test is, according to their website, which is always exciting to read, they are the gold standard. I lost my point. The gold standard in unbiased scoring. Using all assessments, you have to know what their strengths are and what are their biases. So with the Naglieri, the older version, there were some biases in the validity. Are they really testing what they're saying they should be testing? So as we're looking at this, we're keeping this in mind. But what we're excited about this test is that it's created as an unbiased test. I'm going to read exactly what it says. These tests assess the child's problem solving and visual spatial reasoning abilities instead of what he or she may just know, such as a math or a reading assessment test. The questions that incorporate are abstract shapes and design. The NGAT is also considered, as I said, the gold standard of unbiased scoring. Many gifted programs around the nation also use this. Regardless of the student's primary language, socioeconomic status, educational history, and/or vision and color impairment, this is because the NAGT uses minimal language and written directions to avoid relying on a child's reading or writing or even language skills. And actually the 2 colors, the blue and the yellow, help support students who might have visual impairments of different sorts. We used this last year, so that's why it's sort of in process. We're continuing to use these to see is this doing what we think it should be doing. We use these as many of our tools to collect more information on our students, to create a fuller profile for us when we're having those discussions. Do we bring them forward for IQ tests? The other 2 kind of goes with curriculum. For years and years, the state has been coming up with, the state is creating gifted standards, much like you have standards for reading and math. There hasn't been those for gifted. So in my mind, it's always been kind of the wild, wild west. I like this standard, I like this standard, we're going to use this. So about when COVID came, we started looking at what other districts are using around the world in the nation, not the world, the nation. And we created kind of our own MRH gifted standards. Since then, the state has just released, the gifted section has released gifted graduate goals. They're not mandated like standards, but they're suggested that we can use them to help goals for our own program and then actually use to create standards for our program. We feel positive about this, and so since we think about UBD, stage 2 is sort of the assessment stage. Stage 3 is kind of more the activities, but before you have the 2 and 3 stage, you need the stage 1. What are the enduring understandings? What are the standards that you're looking at? So we're putting that on pause, and you'll see it later on for our goals as we move forward. Our data, who's in our program? So, percentages. The state does not look at percentages. Years ago, the state would say 12% of your population should be gifted. Districts would stop at 12%. That's not the goal of this. How do we use percentages? We use these percentages to help guide our identification, guiding our students. Is our population, our gifted population, comparable to the district population? These are not things, so our goal is not to reach 54% and stop. Our goal is looking at this 54%, and are these two numbers comparable? The state also considers something they call their equity index. So they're allowing a 20% difference between these two scores for a number of different reasons. So if these numbers are off by 20%, as a department, we ask ourselves, why is that? Why are these numbers wrong? Is there biases in things that we're doing? And so those are things that we're constantly improving on. The next slide breaks it down into more subgroups. What sticks out the most is our black population and our free and reduced population, are areas that we're continuing to work on, which is something I'm not excited about. But looking at our other sub areas, we're fairly close into there. So twice exceptional, our multiracial or Hispanic, those are things we're still working on. So these are still goals that we're still working on, and hopefully to make those more comparable. So from this idea, from this, what do we come to? We need to work on our stage one. We need to make sure we have a strong foundation for our units. From that, our standards, our enduring understanding, our central questions are strong. Once we have that, we can create assessments and then work on our, what is it that we actually want to do with the students. We want to continue monitoring our screening process. Is it doing what we want it to do? If not, how do we need to look at it different? Do we need to look at different things for that? So next year goals, what we're going to be working on is working on that stage one. Now that we have this data, how are we going to look at it? So now we're going to get this data, collect it, and really look at it, and is this helping us do what we want to do? And the bottom is, this gifted is also sort of this area of just sort of creating things ourselves, and we have ourselves organized, and we realized Amy has things, I have things, Crystal has things, Chris has things, and it would be nice if we create a warehouse so that if someone leaves or whatever happens, we actually have one place to go to find this information. It's kind of quick, but any questions?
I have a question. Mm-hmm. You mentioned that you guys will screen students in first grade, or that's what you kind of identify. And then you mentioned like 2nd through 6th grade. Is it for students that transfer in? Is that
students that transfer in, yes.
So do we like have any system in place where like maybe a first grader that doesn't quite meet that cutoff, we may look again at in 3rd grade or something like that? Is there?
We have our sheets, the kids that we're truly watching. Okay. And so what we found, we're constantly looking at kids. I'm constantly looking at data. The new STAR scores come out. That's what I look at that information. The end of the year tests come out. I'm looking at that data. Right now I have at elementary, about 50 kids on my watch list. I don't necessarily let parents know that I'm watching your kid, because then they want to know, well, when are you going to test them? Do you have enough data? Do you have enough data now? We may not have a data. The question we're looking at is, are they smart? Most of our kids on this list are smart, but we're looking at something a little bit different. Are they looking at this category of what gifted is? So what we found last year with the screening is, unfortunately, our additional identification pool for 2nd grade traditionally looks what it looks like historically, pretty much white. But what we did find out is a lot of these subgroups kids popped up that we're looking at. For example, we had a student who had a high score, had a really high scores, but then had this really low score. So we're starting to figure out and talk about, why does the student have these discrepancies? So Crystal is working with the 2nd grade teachers, or the current 2nd grade teachers, to collect more anecdotal information about those students. Those students come over as well. There's kids that I'm constantly looking at that what has been helpful at the elementary is with the makeup of the elementary staff being more different and maybe more reflective of our population, I'm getting different insights and different conversations with teachers, and they're seeing kids differently. And so right now there's about, looking at an underrepresented group, there's about 5 students right now that after the winter break, I do a really in-depth screening at the elementary and testing, because I can pause E4, exhibits are done, it's a good break. I make the E4 kids wait for a little bit. They're angry, but I can deal with it. And we do a really in-depth testing. And so from that, long answer to your story is we're constantly looking at kids. So what we have found is that the underrepresented students, the longer they are in the district and the more contact that they have, which I'm actually, with exhibit work, able to push into the classroom as well and see kids differently and have those conversations with teachers, they do come up later on in their elementary career. So yes, we do look at kids multiple times. Parents can request testing. We'll do it twice. I'm more maybe conservative with testing because I am aware of the student's social emotional needs, and I want to test a kid over and over again because I don't want the kid to walk away thinking, the student thinking that they're not smart or they're dumb or they're not good enough or something. So that's important for me too to keep in mind.
Because I just, my concern obviously is just that I don't want to miss somebody
right
along the way. So that's what.
And unfortunately, we know we do. And so that's our question of finding out how can we be better at not missing those students.
Can I just ask a confirming question?
Yes.
So you said the increased diversity among our teachers in the elementary school
Yes.
is resulting in an increase in diversity of the students who are being identified.
It has an increase of students that are possibly being identified. It's had an increase in discussions of students that I'm looking at and collecting data on, which I hypothesize is going to help later on for further identification later this year. Opening the door, making it more relevant. Like we saw during COVID, those groups, especially the lower socioeconomic families, were struggling. And that's something that we're constantly aware of and looking at and reading into.
I have another question, sorry. You talked about how we're looking at other areas besides just academic achievement. So what kind of things are you looking at or collecting? What kind of data are you collecting that kind of says, okay, here's the indicator that maybe,
So we do follow state guidelines. You have to have an achievement score. We use reading and math. We want them both at the 95th percentile. If there's science and social studies, if we can get a composite score at the 95th percentile, they qualify. There is the creativity, which we use, the CAP. That's on a different scale. And so based on their age, you need 101 points for second grade and on up from there. The IQ test we use is the WISC-5, and they need an IQ of 95th percentile for that. Then there's a fourth area, which is other, which is a lot of anecdotal information. It could be observations, it's teachers' observations, it's parents' observations, it's interviews that I have, it could be work samples. I've had a third grade boy who created a whole portfolio for Beyonce, which took a while and it built a lot of trust with the African American mother to share this. And so a lot of that is having those conversations and bringing things up and having those dialogues. So this other area is something that we're looking at. And the issue is, how do you take something that's a test score, that's a percentile, that's very concrete to other? And so it's a whole conglomerate of things. Other districts have gifted programs for math gifted or reading gifted or music gifted, or we don't, unfortunately, we're at a size that we can offer that. So we do look at the other components that they have, such as creativity, drawing, thinking. There's new research that a better identifier for gifted could be those social emotional concerns, anxiety, perfectionism. There's a whole slew of things. Could be a better identifier than just IQ alone. There's not enough research on that to really make decisions with that, but that's something that we also look into as well to help us with that decision. So I've had therapists write out things and using that as an identifier.
And DESE does require a talent piece, so Dr. McGee and I actually had this conversation in regards to how do we work to look at a talent aspect. Part of that requires the district to actually create and submit for them to approve to do that. But to Mr. Lyons' point, you have to have the capacity to be able to offer that if we're going to try to do it. So we are looking at how do we increase diversity, because we do have students who are talented who may not necessarily show up on the other side, but they have been doing a great job of actually identifying students and being diligent about that.
So I know that there isn't any testing at the high school level, but are there standards on what high school intervention and support is supposed to look like?
High school, that's a whole other gray area. Going to conferences and talking what a high school program could look like. It's also by size. So there is actually a high school class. Some districts have a high school class where it's in your schedule. Other structures, it's after school or preschool. I don't know what they call those hours in high school. So there's a lot of different.
Yeah, I was going to say 0 hour, but most high schools, believe it or not, don't actually offer a gifted high school. They typically say that AP is the option for that, and so that is an excellent point. But I also had a
But you don't have to be gifted to take AP classes.
Yes, you don't.
Not to.
Are you asking about academic interventions, or are you just specifically talking about gifted?
I was talking more about along the lines of the gifted program, like you see at the elementary.
Like additional resources at the high school level?
Just like Ms. Kruger's role as an interventionist for our district specifically.
She's not here. She can speak more specifically about that. But I know she tries to reach out, I think, quarterly and doing things. It's with her schedule and what we're able to work in.
That's a good question.
Thank you.
Have a good
break.
Have a good break. Also, while Dan is leaving, just want to celebrate MRHE and the museum night. I didn't get a chance to attend, but I had my own personal tour by Dr. Israel, and it was fantastic. So if you did not get a chance to see it, it was really a joy to be a part of.
It was our first time with specialists, sorry.
Yep.
So the first time specialists showing and showcasing, which was exciting.
Awesome. Well, thanks for helping me not skip over you, but I'm coming to the podium beforehand. 4.05, our program evaluation for early childhood, preschool, and parents as teachers.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you to the board for being here tonight and allowing us to present. Thank you to Dr. Jameson for all of your support. I am Jill Loyett, the principal of the ECC, and I am proud to co-present this evening with Dr. Stephanie Bouchard, the coordinator of federal programs, who also plays a key role in our preschool programming with Head Start as well as parents as teachers. So our preschool side of things, and we presented similarly last year, if you remember, we'll talk about both parents as teachers as well as preschool side by side. So our Maplewood Richmond Heights preschool is a research-based early childhood approach to teaching and learning. It was developed in Reggio Emilia, Italy over 50 years ago, and our preschool itself is funded through tuition fees, state child care subsidies, state funds, Head Start funds, and local funds, and we added something that is also helping bring some equity to our families, which we'll talk about in a little bit here as well. We are focusing a lot on our kindergarten readiness. When the cough was brought to the state a couple of years ago, it's been some great data for us to dig into and be able to analyze who is kindergarten ready according to our preschool, who is not, and we'll share 2 years of data now with you during this presentation. We also have been focusing on PLC work, so our professional learning communities and our preschool teachers have really drilled into making sure our kids are kindergarten ready and what that looks like in our preschool approach, and then our state standards in kindergarten. And then we have the very sought after First Friends program, which is our 2-year-old program, who does kind of they stand a little isolated there in our cottage, but when we have preschool enrollment, that is the slots that fill up I see Julie shaking her head, yes. At 8 o'clock we start preschool enrollment, and 8:01 is our First Friends slot. So that is another conversation we're having, is how do we keep our families who are in First Friends in our program. The demographics of those families often look different, and they don't always stay in our program. So we are thinking about how we retain those families who, it's a very specialized program, but a program that we do want to make sure our families continue through the matriculation of ECC. So we analyze that data as well.
And I get to talk to you about Parents as Teachers. It's one of my favorite programs. It's a parent education program in this district, and most districts across the state, are what's called Missouri Curriculum Partners with the Parents as Teachers National Center, which is actually located here in St. Louis, Missouri. We have a rich and strong history tie to Parents as Teachers National Center here in the state of Missouri. The parent educators go through very thorough and intensive training in their first year. They're actually not even allowed to see families and do visits until they've been through Foundational 1 for kids under 3 and then Foundational 2 for kids under 5. They have to go through that state training through National Center before they're ever allowed to see families and give supports. And then they also follow up with a lot of state trainings as well. In subsequent years, they're required to maintain up to 20 hours, actually minimum of 20 hours of training in subsequent years. The program is designed with 4 components. They are required to maintain personal home visits with families. They provide developmental screenings for families. We provide group connections for anybody who's interested, not just the families that are enrolled. We open that up to anybody in the community who's interested. And then we also provide resource connections. So anytime a family is looking for a connection with any kind of resource, we reach out to anybody who might have a resource and try to make sure that families are connected with things that they might need. Okay.
As we continue to present, I just want to give a shout out to our 2 parent educators and Dr. Bouchard for really strengthening the connection between parents as teachers with our preschool. So we have seen a huge increase in the past, maybe not much of a relationship at all between our preschool teachers and our parent educators, and now a very intentional one that includes screenings that we'll talk about shortly as well. This is our budgetary information overview. And as you can see, we have increased our revenues in the last year as we came back from the pandemic. 2021, if you recall, our preschool was shuttered that year. So this is the 2 years of past year's data to show where we are with total revenues in our preschool.
Our PAT data to show you with the budgetary information with staffing with 2 brand new parent educators last year that jumped on board. They could not even see families until they were finished with the training about the end of November. And again, as Dr. Loyette said, the shout out really goes to them. They have really jumped in feet first and just taken off and continued nonstop. They're phenomenal. The state, after they get their training, also requires that they have a very seasoned parent educator come in and watch them do in addition to me watching them do their visits, they also have to have the state come in and watch them. The comment from the state was that these are 2 of the best parent educators that they've ever seen. So phenomenal in their first year. So we're very lucky to have them. In addition to the 2 parent educators we also have the ECC social worker who works with them as well and does some reflective supervision, which is a component of parents as teachers, but she's also integral in that resource connection. So myself being new to the district and not being fully aware of all the resources, she is actually just phenomenal at making sure that they are getting families connected to things. So she is a portion of this as well, and we're very proud to report that the expenditures were down a little bit last year. We're smart in spending some of the funds that we needed, and what we went through everything in the supply house and just trying to divide out what supplies were needed and what we needed to replenish, and then also increasing the allocation that we received from the state. So we're very proud of the work that they did and what they focused on.
All right, this is a little hard to see, so hopefully you can see it better in your document. So this is year 2 of administering the COF, and we have really been drilling into this data in several different ways. First and foremost, our interest is seeing of the children that attended our preschool, which children are those children coming in kindergarten ready. And as you can see with our returning students, that number has increased. We want the blue to go up because blue is ready and gray is not ready. So it's great seeing what had been 45 students ready, now 53 returning students are ready, and the number of not ready has shrunk. So we used, 2 years ago we had 27 students that did come from our preschool not ready. Now we had 15 this year. We attribute that to kids having now 2 years of preschool. So remember, our preschool was shuttered, so it was completely closed for that year. We have seen an amazing kindergarten cohort come through this year, and our STAR scores are showing it as well, of students who have been in our preschool, back in our preschool for 2 years, as well as not so much the pandemic babies that we had before that are coming through with some lack of social emotional skills and other things as well. Another key area that we have drilled into is our Black and brown students. And as you can see from our students, and this doesn't exactly reflect it, but the numbers of our students who were in our preschool as Black and brown children, not all 2 years ago were coming in quite as ready. We put some intentional things in place in our preschool last year to do some intervention specifically with our students that are receiving Head Start funds, to make sure that we're seeing what skills may be lacking and making sure that we are doing some intervention with some expertise we have in the preschool to make sure our students have a level playing field coming into the kindergarten. So we are not where we want to be yet. But we are making great progress in being intentional about how do we do some intervention across the preschool that we know is research-based and can have great impact on students. I'll share in a little bit a couple other Tier 1 academic things we're doing at the preschool to really help with kindergarten readiness.
For the Parents as Teachers program data, as you can see, we've been kind of looking at some numbers over the past years. We definitely know that the pandemic affected things. However, one of the big changes that came out when the pandemic hit, Parents as Teachers National Center, when the pandemic hit, I have never ever in my entire life seen a department, both the state and the National Center, drop what they were doing and flip on a dime to flip to virtual to support families. Ever in my life, because previously they had just absolutely said no, like we don't virtual, we don't telephone, we don't service families that way, and it just turned on its head, and it was all of a sudden not only allowable, but they had trainings up and running within a week of things shutting down, which I just could not believe, and it was some pretty decent training coming out of National Center. So it was pretty phenomenal work that they just pushed out to people and got parent educators really out and ready, so that parents had some supports. But it was also difficult for districts to catch up, and then parent educators, most of them didn't have devices to do some of the work, so there was a lot of catching up to do in those years. So you can kind of see where the trends have gone, but as I said before, the parent educators did some really, really phenomenal work. From November, when they were able to count visits, they did start meeting families and just going in. They weren't counting visits or doing anything they weren't supposed to be doing, but they did go out and actually meet the families and just say, hi, I'm new, I'm going to be your parent educator, tell me about your kiddo. And then after their training, they were able to actually go in and do some of the visits. And so you can see that they hit 250 visits. I can tell you that we're now into December. The program year for Parents as Teacher runs a little differently. It runs May to May. And so their program year runs a little differently, but we're now in December. They're really close. I think the last time I looked, they're really close to that number right now. So they're already exceeding personal visits from where we should be. So they're doing some really phenomenal work connecting with families and getting the word out. We're starting to get that word of mouth. Hey, I heard you have parents as teachers, and we're starting to get more referrals, so that's really great. The other thing that they jumped on board with as well was increasing screenings. Developmental screenings, we use the ASQ and ASQSE for children that are under the age of 3. And for kids who are 3 to 5, we use what's called the DIAL screening tool. And it's a huge push at the state. The purpose of that is really just to get the information into the hands of the parents, particularly for that 3 through 5-year-old group in the DIAL. It's just information for parents to have. These are all skills that you want kiddos to have before they move on to kindergarten. My favorite example is my oldest. I took him in for his 3-year-old DIAL screening, and they handed him scissors, and he had to cut the dinosaur out, and I said, you need to stop. I never gave him scissors. It's painful to watch. Let's not do that. Those are things that kids should know and be able to do, and so we talk about that with parents as teachers. So it's just great to give that information to parents, and then they have, if they're 3, they've got 2 whole years to get their kiddos ready for for kindergarten, and a lot of that is exposure. So we had some great response in the spring from families who came in and had their kiddos screened. They were excited to see the information, and as you can tell, the 3 through 5-year-old screenings jumped. The screenings under 3 did dip quite a bit, but also those parent educators had to be trained. We talked a lot about the training. That was a lot of training. They didn't get their ASQ training thoroughly until January, and also those are done in the home. And so in addition to a personal visit, they also try to do pieces of the ASQ screening along the way, and so that takes a while. And so those are also not really things that you want to walk into the home first in and say, hey, we're going to screen your kiddo. So it takes a relationship building time piece to do that. So those are things that we'll see build up over time. And then as we develop more children under 3, we'll reach out to those families as well to continue to get those screenings for those kids under 3.
I'll just quickly add that the number of 107, we did a screening event, which was a really nice collaboration between our preschool teachers and parent educators, and our families were able to come in, do the screening, and then that actually informed our class placements. So it was the first time that we had preschool class placements based on academics and social emotional information. So that will continue to inform our work moving forward in building well-balanced preschool classes.
So for our goals, where we were at last year, we wanted to increase the collaboration purposefully with the preschool, both as the preschool staff and the First Friends. So we currently weren't meeting purposely with them. We were making some progress. We actually wanted to do like a quarterly meeting. We found that a little bit difficult. We ended up with 2 solid meetings last year with those groups, sort of a beginning of the year, end of the year. But we also found that some of those meetings, and like Dr. Loyette said, that there is more collaboration happening. It's just not formally happening. It's actually organically happening. Parent educators are reaching out to teachers. Teachers are reaching out to parent educators. They know who they are, and they're showing up at IEP meetings and things like that. So there's a lot of organic happening and just not purposeful. It was just hard to get the preschool teachers together at their times. They have very limited PLC time, so it's been hard to kind of collaborate, me and the parent educators and preschool staff last year, to get them all together. But we did get 2 solid times, so that's a goal. We're still working on trying to get that organized. One of the other goals was to increase the 3 through 5 screenings from 33 to 100. We did meet that goal, and so we'll continue to look forward to seeing how we can continue to hit and rise that goal. Like I said, increasing screenings is a goal across the state. That's a huge state push as well. Like I said, they're just wanting to get that information out across the state.
And as far as the next goals, we are still working on our 100% of preschool students attending ECC being kindergarten ready. A couple of things that are noteworthy in our preschool this year is half of our teachers are going through letters training. So our K2 teachers and even above that 2nd grade level, that's the science of reading. Very intensive training. The district supports our staff getting subs to be able to do the training in school and not on their own time like other districts do. And that was a key push for our preschool staff, because we are so unique in the preschool, and Reggio Emilia is our approach, and our teachers are so well vested and knowledgeable in that approach. There was some questions of how does our preschool Reggio Emilia approach transfer into kindergarten readiness and what it looks like with our state standards. And letters is a key way to do that, because it is validating some of the teachers' thinking on what is best practice in implementing literacy at the earliest levels. So 4 out of our 7 are going through it now. The others will go through it next year, and it is helping us form great plans to make sure our kids are ready as far as literacy is concerned. And the other pieces we're implementing Haggerty as well, and that's a phonemic awareness, very structured type of curriculum that basically gets kids to be to identify rhyming sounds and things that we had scored low on the cough the previous year. We're intentionally implementing this year amongst our preschool home spaces as well. The last part is our enrollment process. So thank you to Dr. Bashar looking into some federal funds. This year we're able to identify families in need and offer a preschool slot tuition free with average daily attendance, so ADA. So we had already had Head Start slots, but these are families who did not qualify for Head Start, but we still want to make sure they had access to affordable schooling. And so that is, the funding works the same as K-12 funding, where students who qualify for free or reduced lunch can receive free preschool, and the district counts their attendance through that formula funding. We have 9 students currently in it. We do have space and eligibility for 14. So as we continue enrollment, we want to make sure that we are bringing all of our children to preschool and breaking down any barriers by which they may not be able to come. One of those still is transportation. So Dr. Dietrich and Vince have been key in piloting and getting some ideas moving and generating with our 5-year-old kiddos who are having trouble getting to school. We have no transportation for them. So between piloting maybe a 5-year-old being able to get onto a bus, hopefully in January, to get to school and not have to walk the 1.2 miles from her home with her mom every day, as well as using some Head Start fundings to get some harnesses on some school buses. We're really looking forward to making sure that all of our students can get to our preschool, and we provide a great education for them before they arrive to kindergarten. That is a passion of many of us in this room, and I just want to give a shout out to people for making it happen, right? So making sure that we are identifying all kids, because our preschool does not yet reflect our kindergarten student body. And until we can get there, we have a lot of work to do, but we are slowly chipping away at some of the barriers that are providing access issues.
One of the things that Parents as Teachers requires every year, and I don't know if this has ever been shared with you, but is to do a parent survey. We did not have a ton of people answering our survey this year, so we hope to increase who is responding to it. But those who did respond actually gave us really, really high marks. So we're really proud of, like I said, the parent educators that were out there. So I look forward to doing the survey again this year and getting some additional feedback. Just making parents feel comfortable, making them feel like they were supported. And at the end of the day, that is the purpose of the parent educator program, is just making parents feel like they have access to a resource. And what other program is out there that as a parent just makes you feel good about doing a good job, because it's hard. So they did some really good work this year building some relationships, and I'm really proud of them for that. So we want to give a shout out for that. We also do 2 parent advisory committee meetings every year with Parents as Teachers, and we got some great feedback from that group as well. So we look forward to implementing some of their suggestions as well. Future goals. All right, so moving on. Both the parent educators and myself discussed that one of the things that we'd like to look at is every year we have the group of kindergartners that move on, the numbers fall off, and then we're always looking for some new families, but not just looking for new families, and there's always the word of mouth, and no one ever can really identify how to recruit and then how to measure that. And so one of the things we talked about was we're working on developing some real measurable recruitment strategies. We have a few ideas that are toying around in here that I've talked to Vince about a little bit, that we want to make sure that we're ensuring that the services are reaching the families that need us and that we're accessible to them, and that all families, because it's universal access, so that all families in MRH that want to access Parents as Teachers can get access to us and know about us. And so we're going to work on developing some actual recruitment strategies and then trying to come up with the metrics to be able to measure those, to know what is actually working and what's not. And so I'll be looking ahead to seeing some more information about that. And then the second one is continuing just to work on building those relationships with the preschool staff and just try to figure out the logistics of how to meet consistently, and then talk about the things that we're doing and the connections that we're making. And so, like I said, the parent educators have been really great about just getting over there and getting informally meeting with the staff, but we're looking to really formalize some of those things as well, more consistently than the twice a year that we've been able to do that.
I really did speak on the last 2 bullet points. The one thing I did want to add is when we think about equity, our preschool is very affordable. It has not had a tuition increase since 2018, so that is something I can't talk a lot about yet. But when we think about who is coming and who we are serving, we are very passionate about making sure that our families all have access to the preschool, but what does that look like? So making sure we have those ADA spots as well as Head Start spots, as well as a tuition sliding scale fee. But we have done, thank you to Dr. Ambers Phillips for looking at comparable preschool and their tuition in the area, we are one of the lowest. So hopefully being able to put a tuition increase with some percentages attached, even if we were to do something like a 5% increase, we'd still be under $800 a month for our preschool, which is a couple $100 less than most preschools in our region. So that is something that when we think about access, thinking about who is accessing the preschool, who can afford at what varying levels, so that we can make sure that we are representing our community.
Any questions?
Yes. I'm having a little bit of trouble with the data. Just, I think I appreciate the conciseness of the slides, but there's a lot on these that I'm not totally sure is communicating what I would like to know. On the PAT data slide,
Yes.
So looking at 22-23, it looks like we've had a pretty significant jump in the number of, and I know this is PAT's terminology, non-high need families that are accessing the program, and some pretty modest improvements in the number of high needs and minority families.
Yes.
That to me indicates that our goal needs to be more emphasis on underrepresented families, not all families.
Yes, which is partially why we took the strategy of looking at recruitment and making sure that we're looking where we need to look and who we need to find in order to get that program and that information out to those families who need us. So that was something that, like I said, that we took on. There's about 18 characteristics recorded through the state that we're allowed to mark as far as what's high needs and what's non-high needs, and what's allowable and what's not. And so that's what differentiates on the forms. Not all families report to the parent educators that they may be a high needs family. So some of those things come out over the course of some visits, and that may change over the course of a year or two as they service a family. So sometimes those change a little bit over time as well. So those things also, can't always be done as well. But yes, definitely where we need to focus, for sure.
The data has its limitations, but I think as far as what I would like to see in the specificity of goals needs to be a lot more direct on
looking specifically recruiting non-high needs families, or recruiting high needs families.
Because again, I've taken advantage of PAT with my children. It's a great program. Some folks are signing up simply so they can get early enrollment in our preschool program, not because they have any concerns about developmental progressions for their kids. I think what the point of combining these two presentations is that PAT ultimately helps us with our kindergarten readiness, right? And so again, kids who are typically developing are probably going to be more apt to be kindergarten ready. Not universally, but broad brush. So again, I just want to, we have limited attention and resources, and so let's make sure we're directing them where there's need.
And I will say that that's one of the conversations that Dr. Bouchard and Dr. Dietrich and I have been having around looking at providing PAT services through a mobile approach, particularly for our families who are underrepresented, who either don't want PAT to be in the home and some of those things. So we have been toying around with a couple ideas and have a potential partner who's willing to actually invest in it, because that is one of the things that we've noticed as a means to try to increase readiness for students, particularly those who are underrepresented.
And it's also been an attraction of the PAT house, because families that don't want somebody actually in their home who have been able to get to the house have been able to come there as well. And so it's not at all lost on me, but that is definitely one of the targets that we are targeting. We're specifically looking for a lot more non-high needs families. So yes, I can make that more clear as far as the goal and the data for sure.
So then moving back to the kindergarten readiness data slide. Again, there's a lot going on here, so I'm not exactly sure, overall, we have kids who are ready and kids who are not ready. And are these all kids who are entering kindergarten? Are these kids that have another year of preschool so we can get them ready? I'm unclear how many kids we have currently who entered kindergarten not ready. And then I have questions more about what we're doing about that.
So I can jump in for the what are we doing more about it. So, you know, Reggio is very inquiry based, and as we talk about the standards for kindergarten, a lot of the conversation with Dr. Loyette has been, how do you work alongside of our PAT, early childhood staff, to begin to look at the kindergarten standards and integrate them. And so when we engage in our instructional walks, I identify, along with Dr. Loyette, this is a great entry point to be able to say one-to-one number correspondence. So we went into the last walk, was in a classroom, they were working on drawing something, and my question to the student was, what's the beginning sound of this? What's the end sound, which integrates? But we are not there yet to answer your question, to be to a point where we're seeing a heavier focus on that. And it also requires some work around mindsets, particularly when we begin to think about Reggio. But they are open with the letters training that's happening, so that's the first piece. We actually had this conversation, Dr. Loyette and I think this morning or afternoon, in preparation, because I knew this question would ask when I saw the presentation around how many students of the students, because there is a discrepancy in the number of students who come from our pre-K program and then those students who come from whether in-home programs and things like that. We can bring that data back to you in a more disaggregated manner, but we have found that there is a difference, and particularly with students of color, and continuing to focus on that moving forward, so we can bring that data back and kind of give some specifics about what that looks like, because that's not giving you what you're asking for.
Yeah, I mean, and again, maybe I just need a table and not a graph or something like that. I mean, this is giving me some deja vu back to some conversations during the first year of at-home learning, just broadly, because again, if we're talking about, 10 kids with, in the preschool program on IEPs who are not kindergarten ready, I'm sure that you two of you can see those 10 faces. We know that this isn't just a number, this is actual children, right? And so we can do some things for 10 kids that other districts can't do for 1,000 kids or something like that, right? So I would encourage the continued specificity and creativity around this is a solvable problem right here of kids not being ready.
So the dial data lets you drill down, especially when you do what we had done. So the first time that I am aware of was doing this screening in the spring with kids who had signed up to enroll in the preschool. Giving that information to the parents, a lot of them were 3-year-olds, and then also giving that data to the teachers to look at, so that's going to give them that starting point of what they need to work on over the next 2 years. That's the starting point. And then the teachers get to dig into that information. We try, our goal, I don't know if we're going to get there, but our goal is to take those kids and then make sure that they have a dial again, at least before they leave the preschool, so that we have dial comparison data when they start and then when they leave before they go to kindergarten. And then the KEA, the cough, is given in kindergarten during the first 6 weeks of kindergarten. So these are kids that are already in kindergarten, and as far as what's being done, they're very likely starting to tier those kids as far as tier 1, 2, and
But I will add,
3.
one of the things that Dr. Loyette and I talked about was the work that she's doing in PLCs with the early childhood teachers around looking at those metrics. So if we're talking about ability to recognize letters, letter sounds, having the pre-K teachers to focus on that as a means to ensure that the kids are prepared. Because the preschool teachers currently don't have that type of assessment. And so it's more of going backwards to say, now, how do you use this data? Because technically, that's your data for the kids that are coming through. So we are having those conversations too.
And Dr. Jameson, I'm sorry, I can't see it on the board, and I don't remember seeing this when I was reviewing the material, but do we have a breakdown also of those kids that are going directly from not the preschool to the kindergarten? Because I think that that's going to mess with the numbers a little bit too. So it might not necessarily be that the kids that are engaged in the preschool performance are, I mean, they're just not getting the same benefit. You know, when they get to kindergarten, so they might be a little bit farther behind.
There is a breakout here
Yeah.
for new to the district students. So,
Okay.
yeah.
And I guess the other question that I've got is about the Reggio program, and I guess the state standards for what you need for kindergarten. And those two are congruent. I mean, those two do sort of, or not.
They are not. And so when you think about the state, the Missouri Learning Standards that I emailed you actually breaks out the standards from kindergarten to 12th grade. And so they do spiral, but not from the pre-K. So if you look at other school districts, what they do in their pre-K programs could vary. So we do have a couple of local districts that actually use Reggio, but some of them use Project Construct, and they are inquiry-based, learn through play. But there is a way, kind of what I was sharing with Katie, to integrate. So if I'm working with a student and they're working on their profile picture, there are things that you can actually do to say, okay, based on the beginning sounds that you have, write me a story to begin to introduce literacy, writing, and things like that. So that is going to take time. I do think that the professional development that the teachers are currently participating in will get us there. But I think going slow to go fast, being honest, because it is a shift and we want to continue to maintain what we do in the early childhood center, because that's why parents have kids, but doing it in an intentional manner rooted in what we're already doing. So the answer is no.
Okay, fine.
Yes, but we are trying to kind of deconstruct that down where it makes sense. So there are standards like you got to be able to count up to when you get in kindergarten. We can actually start working on that in the early childhood center.
But I guess on the other hand, there are certain benefits to the program that we wouldn't necessarily have in the state program. Like you're getting skills from that program that it's
Yes.
a trade-off, I guess is what we're.
And that's why I'm saying it's more of a both and not an either or, because I will tell you that there's beauty in what I see when I'm going into spaces with Reggio. But I will also say that some of the work that Dr. Loyette is working on, so each building when we go in has an instructional focus. She is looking at, some people call it aggressive monitoring. It really is collecting feedback on student work. Teachers already document in the preschool with Reggio, but it's like, what are you documenting and how are you using that data to make instructional changes and responses? So they're doing that work now as part of my walks and coaching and things like that. But it is going to take time to get them there, because the way that they document for Reggio right now, like taking a picture of the work, is really for the person or the observer on the other side, where I'm saying you're taking a picture of the work, but how does that align to standards, if that helps?
There's a big push behind early childhood and melding these two things, because this is a long-standing, developmentally appropriate early childhood. How do we merge?
We're not asking for like a drill and kill kind of preschool program.
No one wants to see that, but there is a way to merge beauty and the standards and the data together to make it work.
For the sake of time, I would ask if you could bring this item back with the data points that you're asking, with the table and chart, and then to Josh's questions, I can actually show what we're doing to crosswalk alongside with Dr. Loyette.
Thank you. Okay. And just one clarifying thing for Katie, we do not have if you're in the Parents as Teachers program, we do not give early enrollment anymore.
Yep, that's been taken off of all documentation.
That was not
actually happening.
It just wasn't fair to do.
And one last
One last equity question. You had mentioned you're working on trying to get kids to the school. The aftercare program, I know, has always been a sticking point. What are there creative ideas hopefully happening around that?
That's Discover Club. That'll probably happen at the Discover Club program evaluation at a later date, maybe next month. You may see me 3 months in a row.
Perfect.
Thank you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
4.06, program evaluation for transportation. Teacher announcements.
I want to say, so Jamie Tipton was in my very first 8th grade class when I arrived here at MRH. And as somebody new to the community, his family was one of the first ones that I met. And it was just an amazing welcome. So I was excited to see him here this evening. So, all right, MRH Transportation Program Review. I think one thing to realize is anytime we're looking at these program reviews is that there are people behind them, right? There are people behind them that are serving the students. Okay. So here is our daily transportation crew. We have Greg Kidd over to the left, Karen Paul, Stephanie Simmons, Kathy Lubers, and Ron Clipper. So I appreciate them every single morning. They're down there 6:45, 6:50, getting those buses ready to roll. This is our reserve transportation staff. We'll get into more of this later. But this year has been the least amount of time that we have had to use our reserve staff. And there are some really good reasons and decisions that this district has made that's allowed to that have also had some financial benefits. And 3 of these are building leaders as far as on their teams. So it is not pulling them out of the building so they can do their job and not worry about being pulled away. So they are very grateful for that. So fun fact, our drivers have driven 85,750 miles since the start of the 22-23 school year. That's 29 times from LA to Boston, or 3.4 times around the earth. So I thought that was an interesting fact. And it's cool, we have that on our dashboard that we look at and we have access to, and every day you see it adding and you can see it. I thought that was a fun fact. I do want to discuss our daily average, so what students are benefiting from our transportation on a daily basis. So on a daily basis, our average at the ECC is 105 students, so 26.3 students per bus. That is low, but that's okay because we want our routes to be efficient. We don't want these babies, okay, or our littlest kids to be on a bus for an hour. So that is the reason why you're going to see lower numbers, is those routes. And sometimes they're a little bit slower getting on the bus, getting off the bus. Those steps are pretty high for those little guys. And then elementary, we're averaging 43.5, and then middle school, high school is 33.5. So those are our averages. Part of transportation is our fleet. So this is our current fleet. We have 4 gasoline buses, we have 4 propane buses, we have 2 minivans, 1 cargo van, and 2 trucks. Go ahead. We do have, part of our fleet is aging, hint, hint. So currently we have a maintenance truck that there's quite a bit of duct tape on the interior, which it's still, we consider, but we really limit that to about 10 miles around the district. We are just not going to risk our staff. Now the good thing is there's typically no students in the truck. It's our staff, but and it's still in working condition, but it is aging. And then the second one is our minivan. This one we are still using, but we will only use it locally with students. It's passing inspections, it's doing well. It's just nowhere near as nice as, I think Mr. McCollum has driven both of these vans. And I will tell you that the staff is, is the new one available? And we really try to utilize that one over this one, not because it is unsafe, but we definitely want our kids riding and our staff riding in something that is representative of the expectations of MRH. Okay. So it is important to discuss what are we doing as far as maintenance inspections. So we do review our maintenance schedule and procedures for all transportation vehicles. We keep all of those online. We can go in, we can tell you exactly how much we put into each vehicle for each
in a given year. And that's important because we need to keep an eye on that, because if we start seeing a vehicle like the minivan starting to become a money pit, that's something that we need to start looking at. We do routine maintenance on all of our vans, trucks. They're not considered part of our fleet, but we also do that with all of our gators, our side-by-sides, things like that. So inspections, we do the yearly inspections, and then our buses also are subject to spot inspections by the Missouri State Highway Patrol. And then, and then pre-trip inspections, as required by law, we do those every single day. Every time a bus driver gets to a bus, even if we pre-trip it in the morning, when we get there in the afternoon, we're pre-tripping it again. That is just important. We're putting our most precious cargo on these vehicles, and it's important that we're checking those every single time we get on and off the bus. Okay. A little side note on that, I don't think I mentioned this on improvements, but we're actually looking at, right now there's a log that we keep those on and it's written. We're actually looking at changing those over to a digital format. One, to save trees. Two, currently we do that on paper, and that has to be transcribed into a logbook that gets turned in. We're looking at doing those all digitally, so and we're good. And I know Chris and I will appreciate that when audit season rolls around for transportation. Okay. All of our drivers have to be highly qualified. So this includes 18 hours of classroom training, 13 hours of hands-on personal training, and 15 hours behind the wheel training. That is a minimum requirement. To be honest with you, when I look at that, I'm like, we far exceed that with every single one of our drivers that we train on site. I can tell you that our last driver, who was just certified at the beginning of this year, if I just took a guess, I would say he was probably closer to 70 to 80 hours behind the wheel with a certified trainer. That's important to us, that we're making sure that we have them as highly qualified as possible. They must have a Missouri Class B. Along with that, they have to have an S endorsement, a P endorsement, and an air brake endorsement. One thing, as far as when we're looking at hiring drivers, a lot of times we will see that they have the S endorsement and the P endorsement. A lot of times they're missing the A endorsement, and we have to have that because all of our drivers, or all of our buses, are air brake. Okay. And then DOT, they are always subject to random testing for drug and alcohol. So that is what's required by the state. This is in addition to some of the things that we do from MRH, because safety is important. So we do work with our HR department, and they have an additional 8 hours of vector driver training. We do ride-alongs. That is something we started this year, is our trainer is on at least one bus every single week, and he is keeping a log, right? Because we want to make sure that we're keeping an eye on things and making sure that we're logging that our drivers are being evaluated as well. In addition to that, we also do a random sampling of cameras, right? Because sometimes if the camera's not there, we don't know. So we do a random sampling. He does one a week where he just pulls the camera, he goes in the office, he watches it, and a lot of those are just coaching opportunities. The same way, we're meeting with teachers and we're coaching. The same thing can be happening in our operations department. So he pulls those videos, he'll make some notes, he calls the driver in and says, hey, I noticed this student was doing here, this is a good strategy for dealing with something like that, or hey, I really like the way you did this with this student, that's something I can share with the other drivers. So we're really looking at, what you told me when I took this job, is to make sure that training and safety is important with all of our people, even operations. So geotag, this is interesting. It gives us up-to-date information on our vehicle speed, location, cornering, braking, acceleration. I will tell you that the first time I looked at this data, I got really, really scared because it had us listed in the bottom 1% of all transportation in the country. There is a reason for that. It was actually set up wrong. Okay, our sensors do not have a seatbelt sensor. So it was recording that 100% of our routes, because it wouldn't record that the driver had a seatbelt on, it was recording that we were in violation. The minute we were able to correct that, we have instantly shot to the top 25%. So that was important to note. So Geotab gives us a lot of really good information. It will give us live alerts if a bus throws a trouble code, if a driver goes more than 3 miles over the speed limit. Okay, we're actually set to get alerts. So that we can, if a bus corners too hard, if a bus brakes too hard, if a bus takes off too fast, these are all things that we can monitor. Which, again, safety is important, so we don't mind monitoring these things. We do additional trainings on PD days. One of the trainings we just did was drivers against trafficking. Human trafficking is real. There's actually a special training just for DOT and bus drivers. So that is one that we had completed last year. Traversa, that is our parent app. And to be honest, we have not rolled that back out this year. There are some issues with Traversa that we need to make sure we get taken care of before we roll it back out to parents. That is an area of improvement, and if we can't get that to work the way we want it to, then that might be something we look at replacing. Because that is a valuable tool parents want to use, but in my opinion, until it's ready and it gives our parents what they need, that is not something we should roll back out. And then Maplewood Fire Department is another training, if you see at the bottom. The Maplewood Fire Department had never been trained on propane buses, just gasoline and diesel. So we took our buses over into their garage. It was cold. They did not want to come to us. They're like, hey, we got this nice firehouse. How about you just pull it in? We did that, and every single crew at Maplewood and Richmond Heights now have had an opportunity to get on our buses and look at the safety features and shutoffs for propane. Emergency transportation drills, these are done twice a year. Students practice both front of bus and rear bus evacuations. That's a spelling mistake. My apologies. I was actually an English teacher, so I feel really embarrassed right now. So growth areas. One is we've had Geotab for a couple years. It just hasn't been utilized. So that is something that I'm digging in, twice a month when I'm meeting with our head of transportation. So each driver is capable of getting a percentage and being compared to over 40,000 other drivers in the country. So that is data that we are starting to share with our drivers, because everybody likes a little bit of competition, right? Special needs accommodation. We want to ensure that transportation services are accessible for students with disabilities and special needs. Currently, we don't have any buses that help students with mobility needs. So those are things that we're looking at in the future of what does that look like as, do we need all 8 buses that we currently have? Because now we're stacking routes. Do we need to go down to 7 buses and then, or 6 buses and then get a different bus that also has some access for students with mobility needs? Those are things that we're looking at. ECC transportation needs. This can be updated. Just this week, Vince and I were really excited. Dr. Bouchard sent us an email where currently if you are 5 or older, you can ride the bus without a restraint. DESE has just changed that to 4. We were actually looking at retrofitting a bus, which was not cheap, but DESE has said that yes, this is safe to do. So the caveat to that is it does not mean we can instantly start doing transportation. Those are conversations we need to have with our finance department, because that is not reimbursable transportation either. But this is part of a bigger conversation where we need to discuss what is long-term, who are we providing transportation to, what are the safety measures we need to put in place. And then green transportation, I keep being told that there is a grant coming really soon from DESE for electric buses. What I am being told is that the grant will provide nearly free electric buses, but we have to pay for the infrastructure, which I've already talked with electrical companies to give quotes on that, and we're looking at between $35,000 and $55,000 per bus to get that up and going. That's really important to us. The other thing we keep discussing is, if you're looking at, our speech and debate, you're looking at our swim team, you're looking at students going over to U City for football, we're in that sweet spot of sometimes we're transporting kids that are like 6 to 10 kids, So in the minute you go over 6, we're putting them on a bus, right? And a bus is much more expensive, and not to mention we pride ourselves in sustainability, and we're putting them on a giant bus, and we have like 7 kids on it. So one thing that we continue to look at is what does that look like if we decrease the number of buses we have, because now we're stacking buses, and we have 2 backup buses right now for the most part. I would say 1 that just sits there as a spare, as a backup in case one goes down, which is still important to have, but is that something that we have to have? Instead, we can get more green and sustainable with something like this. Okay. Budget allocation, the fund sheet, right? Here's some important things. If you notice, budgeted is actually, I think in a lot of things, it's actually trending down. And there's some good reasons for that. The biggest one, if you look at salaries, that is really around that we have been able to stack our routes. So instead of 6 to 7 buses pulling out every afternoon and every morning to do routes, now that we're stacking, it's 4 to 5 buses pulling out. So that's decreasing your salaries on a daily basis. Since we have purchased the new minivan, we're able to utilize that more and use that to transport kids that are smaller groups. The other change that we've made that has lowered those salaries there is if we do have a group going and we already have that minivan going out and there's 6 kids that need to go to Columbia, we just rent another minivan. Financially, it just makes a lot more sense. You spend $300 to $400 on a rental, maybe going to cost you $50 to $80 in gas. The coach or the sponsor drives them, and then you're not taking a driver out of the building. They're driving to Columbia. You're paying for a hotel. You're paying for their salary. So those are some things that we have done to bring down that salary cost. And I think it's also just helped with the overall climate and culture of our drivers, because they now have a reasonable workload for driving. It used to be where we were begging drivers to drive. Now it's the drivers who are wanting to make those trips and do that overtime, they're doing that. And the drivers who, like, hey, I want to be home with my kid or my grandkid, they're also able to do that. Good. And the last thing, when I was looking online of a lot of the program evaluations for transportation, there was this one that was really big on discipline. I will tell you, is 11 years as a principal in this district, I think I maybe had 6 or 7 bus referrals during that time. And I think a large part of that is our drivers are part of our community. A lot of schools, neighboring schools, they are, using another party to do their transportation. Those drivers come in, they drive the kids to school, they go home for the day, they come back in the afternoon. Our drivers are part of the community, and I think that just goes a long way. We know that relationships are important, right? And I think that's a big reason. So we don't have significant issues because our drivers are part of the community. So. Questions?
I do have a question about the leasing of the vehicles. Is that new leases every year or serviced leases?
So we have I believe it was, and I'm probably going to lean on Chris a little bit on this, I believe it was an 8-year lease. And if you go back to here, there we go. In 2022, the lease was $133,263. Our payments from here on out are right at $125. They may fluctuate just a little bit, but that's right where they're at. But
is that like the general lifespan of a I guess a well-used bus is 8 years, or is that,
so there's actually regulations in each state on how long a bus can be in service. It's actually this whole game of, like, in Missouri, a bus can be in service for this many years, but in New York, it can be in service for like 25 years. So all the buses that go out in Missouri, a lot of them go up to other states that have longer service availability. But I would say probably right in that 8-year range would be what we're looking at.
Chris, the buses that we got, I think, right before I arrived, what's the lease life for those? Because I do know we just purchased new buses.
It's an 8-year lease.
8 year, okay.
and is it staggered? Like, will, like this, like bus 1 their 8 years is coming up, but bus 2 is like 3 more years on it, like that, or we're not going to have to
No,
replace
they're all an 8-year lease. Yeah.
But, but
Yeah,
all
there
at
is,
the same time?
there is no staggering. And if you look at it, so all 8 buses, okay, it's an 8-year lease, so even if you staggered it, you were still gonna have those lease payments all that time.
Right, but I'm saying as far as like having to renegotiate, like if the lease price went up, if you had to, like, you know, if you had to negotiate a new lease or, you know, make that, whatever the down payment is, you know, calculating that into the budget, like, are you gonna have to do all of that at once, or is that just something that's going to happen? Does that make sense?
So all the buses are released at the same time as a package?
Oh, okay, all right.
Yep.
That,
And then at the end of those,
Gotcha.
and it is a lease with a purchase option, but we've opted not to purchase at the end and just refresh the lease. We've noticed at the end of our lease periods, the buses, we're in that weird spot where the bus, we don't put a lot of miles on our buses. So there's a lot of resale value in those, so we're able to exercise that at the end of our lease. But we have noticed at the end of the lease period, we're pretty much done with them and ready for some movements.
Yeah. And we also don't know what the technology is going to be, right? So like, we're really excited about adding 4 propane buses, right? They're more sustainable. But what we've also learned is if we're driving that bus, you know, a distance, it's a lot easier to find a gasoline station than it is a propane station, right? So what we've seen is our mileage on our gas vehicles are higher than our propane ones. Because our propane ones are getting a majority of their wear and tear here in the city, which is more wear and tear when you're running them around the city. As compared to if we have something further out, we're using those gasoline buses just because the fuel is more accessible.
Dr. Dietrich, it sounds like stacking the routes has been really successful in a number of different ways. What made that able to be done? Because it wasn't always stacked, so, yeah.
Yeah, changing the start times and the end times of schools. So, you know, I think there has been, you know, I think just overall conversation, and it's probably also bringing a Chris McGee to have some conversation, but there has been some impact as far as, you know, start and end times on the curricular side. From the operations side, it was difficult at first because it was something new, but we're doing it well now. And there hasn't been one issue this year with having a missed route. And part of the reason for that is now we have a good stable of drivers, and we have a sub bus ready to go every single morning. So if anything happens, we have a driver there every single morning that can pick up a route and go. I would also say, I forgot to mention this, on fuel, so you'll notice, I believe fuel costs kind of going up and down. We were able to budget a little less this year. Yeah. One of the things that we did is with the newer buses, they don't have to idle as long, right? So when we were using diesel, you have to idle those things and you really have to get them warm before you pull them out of the lot. So some of our old school drivers still want to get in and they want to warm them up for like a half hour, right? We don't do that anymore. We don't need to. And I believe that's and we'll actually get an alert if somebody runs their bus and idles too long. So some things that we put in place is we're not idling at the bus yard as long, okay? We're getting it warm, okay? And we're getting the inside warm for kids, okay? But we don't need to run it for 30 minutes. At the same time, when we pull up to a school, it's actually shown it's less wear and tear on a vehicle if you shut it off and restart it once the kids get on. Not to mention all the pollutants that you're putting in the air, and kids are going right by the buses and walkers are going right by the buses. But because we've implemented some idling procedures, I think that also has had an impact on our fuel.
It seems like, thank you. This seems like a drastic change from last year when it felt like there weren't enough drivers, there's not enough buses, we were spending lots of money on contract bus drivers, and now all of a sudden we have potentially an extra 2 buses, and we have 4 reserve drivers, and mazel tov.
Your effective management of this area is noted.
Thank you. And I've had a lot of help too. Like, I mean, it's been great being able to bounce ideas off Chris, and my driving crew has just really stepped up this year and done a great job. So. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thank you. for 27. Collective bargaining date.
Chris, can you project for me? No, I tried it earlier. It's actually working. So while Dr. McGee pulls up the presentation, I do want to thank Mr. McCullum for actually coming and staying, because as a part of the communication, I did invite members of our association to join us. So as a part of our efforts, based on the climate and culture data we received from the previous year, one of the aims was to increase collaboration with the association, which also included members of the board. So at the onset of the year, members of the board actually met with the association reps, with teachers, and one of the topics that came up during that conversation was around collective bargaining. So this year, I actually meet with the leaders of the association reps, and this is part of the conversation that we've been having. And so as a means to actually be transparent and to keep the board informed, this item is coming forward. So in October, the original request from MNEA representatives came asking to meet to discuss what actual collective bargaining could look like. This item again is coming forward as a means to ensure transparency with the board, because the board will not only approve our H policies, which will come in January and then February, but also the initial collective bargaining agreement once it's actually developed. And I'll talk about that a little bit later. So I am not going to read the definition of what collective bargaining is, but it really is the ability for an identified group to be able to convene. I recently submitted to the association modification based on legal counsel's feedback around that particular group, and I'll talk a little bit more about the deadline, but the bottom line is they actually have an agreement, and that agreement outlines how we are to actually negotiate and what they can bring forward when we begin to talk about articles. Next slide, please. So there are actually 5 parts to the collective bargaining process. So the preparing for bargaining process is where we are now. And so the association has actually collected signatures. They have provided a sample of a date that we can actually look at with the document, and looking at using the League of Women to actually facilitate that process. So I'll talk a little bit more about where we are in the process when we get to the timeline, but you can see here where it says preparing for negotiations, conducting negotiations, and part of that the district is looking at is whether or not we want to use a mediator to ensure that the process goes smoothly and that collaboration is effective for both parties. The ratification part of the contract is what the board would actually do once that agreement is made. And if there are any issues that actually surface during that process, then you would go through a resolution process. And then the last item is around changing or clarifying the contract. Even though the agreement will actually be established, if there are items that we want to bring back that maybe surface after the board agrees, we are able to come back and make modifications and changes if needed. Next slide, please. I frequently talk about collaboration, so the association has actually been really good partners, and looking at some of the information that the NEA currently provides around why they think we should bargain. So for me, I was looking at parallels to our strategic plan. So one of the benefits that the NEA outlines is improved student learning. This is actually captured in our strategic plan under For Our Students. And it also talks about looking at classroom seat sizes. So I'm pointing that out because that's also a requirement in MSIP 6. So it's not anything outside of the ordinary. MRH has always historically been below the minimum threshold that the State Department requires. And then it also talks about school health safety issues, which again align directly to our strategic plan. The other piece, which is also very prevalent in our strategic plan, which is led by Dr. Ambrose Phillips, is attracting and retaining our teaching core, and this falls under For Our People. I was recently sharing with someone that the state's average for retention rate is 59% for the 3-year average. So this is something we want to continue to keep our eye on. So you want to remember that it is not just about salary, it is also about working conditions, but it also talks about the piece around mentoring and induction, which also falls under the Human Resources Department. And then the last item that is highlighted through the NEA is a focus on social justice and racial equity, which that is interwoven throughout our full strategic plan and indicates how we work and partner not only with teachers, but community and families too. Next slide, please. So where are we in the process? So the original, I've had an initial meeting in August with the association. There has been some email communication. We have had in-person meetings, and actually I was supposed to have the policies ready by today. I'm still working on them, but they will be shared with the association to review. They also have shared sample policies. I also shared with the association that while we love our teachers, teachers do not write policies, and I also shared the policy from MSBA around that. So MSBA has provided us with sample policies, and we also, at the assistance of my assistant Kat, have looked at local policies around collective bargaining for the H policy. So Valley Park School District has recently started, they're in the phase of collective bargaining, Webster Groves and some of those places. So looking at which districts actually touch us, but also looking at districts that have like sizes. And again, those policies will come to the board for study in January, for approval or action in February, and so that's part of that process as well. Next slide, please. So next steps, some of these things have already happened. So Dr. Ambrose Phillips and I met with legal counsel on I think it was Monday, and so from that conversation we were able to get some additional language related to how we're defining the bargaining group. So initially we were seeking to go through the Board of Mediation, but apparently there has been some shift or change which allows the group to provide support to all of other individuals who want to bargain, with the exception of teachers. So say, for example, because individuals like social workers and nurses and things like that are not actually part of this collective bargaining group, we could go through the Board of Mediation for them. Right now, the only association that has indicated interest in bargaining is the MEA at this point. And so the H policies will be shared with my cabinet, and then we will schedule a meeting with district legal counsel and MEA reps and Unison reps in January, so that information will share with my assistant to begin to do that. We do have a meeting scheduled for tomorrow, again, to talk about the potential for having a mediator and the benefit of actually having that. So an update will be provided to the board in the board note, and also to association. As I receive additional information, they receive information. And then from there, they will schedule an on-campus union recognition election, and then H policies will be approved, and then we'll continue the process from there. So that's where we are currently. I do want to say that for me, the aim is to ensure that all staff are represented. So while MEA has expressed an interest, continuing to have that dialogue currently with all individuals to ensure that their ideas, views, and things like that are being represented. So that's something that we've actually talked about. We currently do have structure, so I want to be very clear around that. We have teacher leaders, we have CBTF, Compensations Benefit Task Force, and then we also meet with support staff. And so I think it's important for us to recognize that we don't want to do things to people, but we do want to collaborate and what that looks like. So part of that conversation is how do we continue to engage with those groups to ensure that their voices are still being heard in a manner so that we can continue to make decisions. That is the conclusion of my presentation. What questions might you have?
Clarification. So this is new for us as a district. We have some history, but not in the recent past. We have some unique structures in place that you just noted. So things like CBTF and teacher leader would be replaced in whole by a collective bargaining?
Yes, and so my conversation with legal counsel was you cannot have other groups convening to talk about things that are actually discussed during collective bargaining. And just being honest, I think that we want to be clear that those individuals have an opportunity, but those current structures will no longer exist once we get to the point of collective bargaining.
And the folks classified in the bargaining unit, whether they are members of the union or not, would be subject to whatever decision would come about. We're not, the district would not be making separate deals with different groups. There would be a group making a.
Can I piggyback on that clarification also?
Yes, please.
The bargaining unit would only be made up of MNEA people, or it's able to have non-union?
So not,
or is that still for discussion?
So not based on the conversation that I was having with Cindy Ormsby, District Legal Counsel. So we are unique in that we do have two associations. So we have MSTA and we have MNEA.
And then there's also, isn't there a third section of teachers that are not in either?
Right.
Okay.
Correct. And so to Katie's point, once MNEA does show the petition and is the recognized group, whatever decisions that they make would be on behalf of all of the teaching staff.
I have a question just about the policies that you're drafting. Are these just general policies? Because, you know, you've got different buildings, they all have different needs, but what you're drafting, is that contemplating that, or that's for them to take care of it? We're just saying, like, these are generally what the district wants as goals, figure it out amongst yourselves, or what's going on?
So we, with the H policies, those policies are actually drafted by administration to be given to the board, but we don't differentiate by building because those policies are district policies that outline the work that we will do with the association once they're drafted. So our work, when we get to the point where we get to negotiations, which is the second step, is those the times when those items would actually bubble up. So for example, we are having those conversations now in compensations benefits task force. So whether it's leave time, whether it's tuition reimbursement, which is a part of the benefits package, all of those things are currently being discussed now with our current structure. The difference is once we have that approved agreement, that is going to guide the work that we do versus, so we're doing the work, it's just not board approved in an agreement.
But what H policies are, so, you know, the MSBA has the policy, the handbook, right, broken up into a number of things. H is only about negotiations.
Yes.
And most other districts, I think it appears, have two policies. One about who gets recognized, and the other about how we actually negotiate once a group has been recognized. So that's the level that
yeah, I just
we don't have it yet, right?
Yeah.
Coming soon.
It also, I don't know, I need to get into weeds about this, but are we also going to expect the teachers that aren't belonging to one of these organizations to pay union dues? Is that something that they're?
So we don't dictate that. So my role as superintendent is to work with cabinet and MSBA to bring policies to the board once the board, so the board's only role is to approve the H policies, and then whatever that agreement, that's what we do. So that's the responsibility of my good friend Rich McCullum over there and those other folks to identify if they want to bring other people along to join the union. I really have no place in sitting in that. And so whatever they do with that and whomever joins is fine. We really would just work with the leadership to begin to talk about what are those articles that we want to begin to focus on, and then try to do some parallels based on the current work that we're doing and things like that. It's different because I think one of the questions I did ask Vince, I said, when is the last time that we actually bargained? And so that was 2 superintendents ago. And this is new and bringing it back and having some actual policies, because most districts have age policies already. So that's what's taking a little time, and they already have their bargaining groups defined. So we're starting from scratch in essence. So that's why it's a little bumpy right now. So we have partners and trying to move it forward and ensuring that we're recognizing the voices of all teaching staff as we get grounded in the work.
I'm just curious, if we had collective bargaining previously, was that not codified in policy, or were those policies removed?
The policies are not present currently, and I will be bringing policies to the board in January.
It was over 20 years ago, so.
Yeah, I was gonna say, I don't know if that's not part of the lore.
Chris was a young teacher back then. He was around though. Yeah.
Good that we will no longer exist under oral tradition in this capacity. Okay, thank you. Item 5.01, FY24 November financial statements.
Okay, so first revenue. 86% of our revenue is from local sources, the large majority of which are from our local taxpayers. The next largest is state, which is at 10%, followed by county, federal, and then county. And then pesky other. Operating revenue was about $3.1 million, or nearly 10% of the budget, and is comparable to our prior year. Salary and benefits make up 77% of our budget, followed by purchase services, then supplies, and capital outlay. Debt is 1% of our budget. Purchase service expenditures are about $1 million, or 32% of the budget, and are higher than the prior year. Supplies and capital purchases are 34% and 32%, respectively. Supplies tracking lower and capital outlay tracking similar to the prior year. Supplies related to technology are lower through November when compared to the prior year. Overall, we're about $11.6 million, or 30% of the budget, and comparable to the prior year. Here is the trend of our actual and budget operating fund balances. Fund balance as a percentage of expenditures is currently budgeted at 35% for the end of the year. And that is down 10% from the prior year unaudited ending fund balance. Next month, this will say audited ending fund balance. Are there any questions? Very well, thank you.
Thanks, Chris. 6.01, our committee reports. We'll start with SSD Governing Council.
Yes, so we met on December 4th, and the PAC, which is the Parent Advisory Council, kind of discussed the importance of DEI for SSD students at partnering schools. And when they mean DEI, they just don't mean about race, but how are those students being included? How are they being part of the general population for students? Are they being invited to participate in different sports events and activities and treated like a general student instead of a student with a disability? So that's one thing that the Parent Advisory Council is really want to make sure that partnering schools are really, when they say include those students in those type of activities, not just what goes on in the classroom, but also in the classroom, that they feel like they're part of the classroom. Some schools have the students separate, but they want to start bringing them together so that students can really understand one another's need, get to know each other, and make students feel more like they're part of the school district regardless of their disability. The PAC also is having an event coming up in May where they're asking the partnering schools to have a table so parents can come and kind of learn about what other districts are doing. And I will have more detail on that. And the PAC went over the responsibilities of SSD role, their liaison, and the school role when a parent have a complaint or concern about their child who might have an IEP, and just pretty much that the parent need to start with their school district and not go straight to SSD. So each school district have a liaison, start with your liaison, the principal of that school, and try to get it resolved. If it's not getting resolved by going to those entities, then they want you to bring the complaint to the special school district. Each partnering district received their budget from SSD, and SSD met and went over it, and then they will have more discussion with the council in January. Lastly, SSD first quarter updates on CSIP and their strategic plan. They are meeting their goals as expected. That's it.
Thank you. Calendar committee?
Calendar committee met and is on track to have a recommendation for the 25-26 school year calendar in February.
CBTF.
CBTF, Compensation Benefits Task Force. This is my third year on that committee. I mean, I like it. I do like it. So we have split up into subcommittees, and we have 5. And so subcommittees have been delving into their topics, whether it's tuition reimbursement, family planning leave, Discover Club, benefits, teacher expectations. And so we've got a couple of updates from a couple of the committees, and then we will get a couple of updates the next time, and each committee is continuing to do their work, and we'll see where that goes.
Thank you. We'll do a brief MSBA conference report. So our night is getting long. I've ordered it sort of according to when the content came in. So we'll go ahead and start with Rachel. And I should just frame this by saying Rachel, Linda, myself, Dr. Jameson, and Kat all went to MSBA. So we're going to tell you what we learned and what we want to take action on.
Okay, in a short format and quickly. Okay.
What are the key highlights?
Key highlights. So I'm going to stick with the things that were really interesting for me. I went to the board president workshop as vice president in order to be able to support the president. And what I found most striking was they made the suggestion about community and district tours for new board members. I thought that was really key, and making sure that new board members knew exactly who the key personnel in the district were, and how much Robert's rules we all could stand a refresher on. The finance seminar I went on was amazing, and I've attached so everyone can see it in board docs, the actual course outline, which was incredibly helpful. The political speech was, I also attached that one so people can read that as well. That was really interesting. It's a very murky line between free speech and protection of the community, the district, the students, and very robust discussion about that. Learned a lot, and so read up on that. I'll skip the AI because we all went to the AI, and someone else may have had a different takeaway. And then speaking with the state board was just really curious. My key takeaway from that was that they are right on the same track we are, that teacher retention and recruitment is right up there. And they have, the state board has a blue ribbon commission on teacher recruitment and retention. What I found interesting, and I felt like did not reflect our district, was the state is saying that teachers leave due to student behaviors. And I have not heard that in our district. And so I found that I wanted to ask some more questions. These sessions were very quick. I was very surprised. They were like 45 minutes, here, boom, and then go. And then the state had some concerns. Just a fun fact, I wasn't aware of this, that all of the guidance we get about what we have to do as a district, charter schools get a little bit different, if not much, guidance, and therefore that is causing some significant problems with education. In this particular moment, it was about charter schools opening and then closing abruptly, and the district that those kids are in, how that disrupts their education and disrupts that district, and yeah, I found that heartbreaking. Next.
Oh,
thank you. Linda?
Yes, me. So the 3 sessions I attended, the first one was how to communicate with your community. Springfield School District, which is one of the largest one in Missouri, actually talked about their communication, how they communicated with the community stakeholders, parents, when they was trying to pass Prop S. First time it failed, and so they had to come together and realize what had to be done to get it passed. So what they did was start hosting community gathering with stakeholders, parents, started forming committees, asking those individuals, reaching out to them personally, the ones who was against it, to hold meeting with them to kind of see why. And as they were having these communication, they started building the committees, and then they were able to have everyone involved to understand, to be their voice, to talk about it. And when it came up again, it actually passed. They talked about the strategic plans and everything. So in the box, well, you know, application for practice, I feel MRH, we are doing it. Dr. Jamison is doing it already. Parents are more involved, stakeholders are really involved, so I left that blank because I think we're on point. As the superintendent was speaking, I'm like, yep, we're doing that already. The second session I attended was supporting female students and leaders. They provided data about young girls' confidence declines went from 5th until 9th grade. And usually after their freshman year, the confidence started building up. It's like between the 5th and 9th grade. Some young girls don't feel like they're included, or they don't have the friends or the support to have the confidence. So as they're getting in 9th grade, high school, there's probably more things they could be more involved in, start meeting people, building friendship, having a relationship, which build up their confidence. So one thing, take away that, and I know here at Maplewood we have programs and activities for our young girls in different organizations that can help build up their confidence, but just to find different ways to build up the young girls' confidence, and what are certain districts doing, you know, to help build up their young girls' confidence, and maybe we can do a comparison or even surveying our girls here at Maplewood to see the why behind it, and just pretty much encourage school districts to have programs to help young girls build up their confidence, and open to all female students. That way every female student would feel included. Lastly, I attended the intersection of course in school, which I found this was very interesting. A lot of things I didn't know. They actually had Judge Jimmy Edwards, if you are familiar with him. He'd been in the juvenile court judge for a long time, started a school to help kids get back on the right path. So he mostly talked about, along with other attorneys, how to address students for their wrongdoing. A lot of school districts, even parents, address it the wrong way, so they just talked about their legal rights of students that each district need to know about, and protecting the rights of the students and keeping them safe when something happened. There are protocols that comes in place, and he was saying that most schools, principal would just automatically call the police, have the child taken away. You can't really do that. It's really illegal. You really have to separate the child from whatever happened, and an adult has to be present at all times with the child. They cannot talk to the police by themselves, and a parent has to be called. and that it's really important that these schools really know the legal rights of the victim. So one thing I took away is like, you know, what type of restorative plan that school district have for students once they're suspended or expelled to get them back in school, and what does that look like? And something I forgot to put in here was how can we have those talks with the community, with parents, staff, where we might bring Judge Edwards here, legal service, other attorneys kind of talk about this topic, our resource officer, so that everyone's really aware the rights of the students of what's supposed to happen when something happened with the students misbehaving or whatever it may be.
Thank you. I'll just highlight a couple of takeaways from some of the sessions that I participated in. As Rachel mentioned, she attended the board president workshop with me, which was like 3 hours, 3.5 hours. I would recommend, since unlike some districts, we typically have a vice president move into a presidency within a few years, or 1 or 2, or very rapidly. So I think that would be a good practice for us to maintain if it is an option to send 2 folks there, because the conversation is beneficial. In particular, we participated in a governance level question game show style activity, which those of us who attended the Region 7 meeting earlier this fall at Ladue High School participated in a scaled down version of that. I found it to be particularly useful, and I think it could benefit us as a body for ongoing professional development to engage in some government level question training to help aid our efforts in this space. I think one other session I found really well presented was the interagency crisis response session from Lee's Summit School District. They had their police, fire, and school district personnel present to talk about how they collaborate. We already do a good job, I think, collaborating in that space with our local first responders. One other aspect that they raised is that their city councils and school board members also meet to discuss not only crisis response and emergency support, but also coordination around taxing and bond issues. It may be something that we would consider as a body to create closer collaboration and alignment with our 2 local city councils to participate in discussions about issues of mutual concern. The delegate assembly was, as one could expect. MSBA has developed a platform. People gave some feedback. It is essentially the same platform that they've developed in the prior year. So if you want to take a look at their advocacy positions, they're available there.
So I'll remind community that this is also a part of MSIP 6 for the board to engage in continuous learning with the superintendent. So we are a team of 8. And so I bucketed my sessions around alignment to the strategic plan. So each of the board members did select sessions that align to the strategic plan based on recommendations that were provided. So the areas where I attended really focused on the areas that were also highlighted in some of the climate and culture data: communication, school safety, and then also looking at the financial piece, which would be for our resources, and looking at the collaboration between the Human Resources Office and the Finance Department. So in short, for the comprehensive communication plan, the focus was on branding, processes, and identifying when and who gets information and using what platform. I did indicate applications for practice. Those individuals have already received notes, and we will continue these conversations during my collaborations. School safety ecosystem, I do want to shout out Dr. Dietrich. One of the sessions that I attended, we are already doing the work, and so they want us to co-present with them. But basically, they talked about the reunification practice. One of the items I do want us to consider is tabletop discussions and scenario practice, which will help us to operationalize the current plans that we have in place. And then also to look at safety protocols for our board members, which was enlightening to hear, around locking doors, looking at parking places and spots for board members, and then also what scenarios will we practice as a community when we host board meetings. So further information coming soon for that. And then the last item is really around operationalizing consistent meetings with standing agendas, and then looking at the parallels between the two departments as a means to ensure that we are being fiscally sound with our expenditures aligned to staffing and things like that. Lots of good learning.
And as a reminder, MSBA happens the end of the first week in November of every year, so you can pencil it in for next year. It is a good opportunity for us as a board to do some shared professional development and see how business gets done in other parts of the state, which is always eye-opening. All right, 6.03 of our student advisory report.
All right, good evening, everybody. I'm here to provide you with this month's presentation from our Principal Advisory Leadership Board. So this past month was one of the first months we were able to kind of move away from the introductory phase of this board and kind of move past just like generating those connections and those norms and protocols and really start to kind of digging into doing some work. So we had a few things that happened this month. We were able to meet with every single board throughout the district, the ECC, the elementary, and the middle school, as well as our own high school group. And we also had the opportunity provided to a few of our board members, to our student reps, to join in a local PLC and professional development. So those are both really exciting things that we were able to achieve in this last period. So for our students, the actual discussions and work that we did with these other district boards, because we've moved past that kind of introductory phase, we decided we need to kind of center our work around a theme or a goal or a topic. And for this month's work, we decided to focus on mental health and school stressors. So our reasoning behind this topic was really just seasonal. If you think about the academic season, it's state testing, standardized testing, finals. For our older students in the high school, for our seniors, it's college application, college decision season. And then outside of the academic space, just seasonally, you're looking at the holiday season and a massive transition from this year to next year, which for all ages can be incredibly stress-inducing. So the PAL board had conversations around that, and we decided this could be a good theme to kind of look at students' awareness of mental health resources and support in schools, school environment stressors, and just the general well-being and knowledge of our student body across all ages. So I'm not going to go too into the weeds of what we discussed within each school or within each district body. All of the data, the conversations, and the notes that we took from these discussions go straight to building leadership, and they have the opportunity, the ability to really evaluate and dig into things with their students, not just with their board, with their whole student body, and then move forward with that information how they want to. But I do want to provide you with a couple key takeaways. So our overall general takeaway that we're able to receive from all three levels is that we need to, an area for growth is continued support in transition years. So we had a lot of students that had discussions around like when it comes time for a big transition, whether in age or school or instruction type, they could use some additional support and resources and more space for student voice, continuing to emphasize those conversations with students and recognize their ability to have conversations on these subjects. So to provide you with some takeaways for each building, so at the ECC, I got to meet with the ECC personally, and I was really just blown away with their ability to actually engage with these topics. I don't think we give them enough credit for their ability to really kind of express themselves and communicate. And one of the most promising things we saw out of the ECC was that they're really strong with like resource and support identification. They all had somebody that they could mention that was like, this is a caretaker for me, this is someone I know exists as a support support. They were able to outline who their counselors were, when they can visit them, the supports they can offer, and that's a really promising feature, I think, and that will continue to develop as those children grow older if they already have that resource identification. That's a really strong point. In the elementary, our board was able to have very thoughtful conversations with these kids, and again, they're still younger children, but they have great awareness of the bigger issues at hand. They're thinking about their peers and what their peers may be going through. They're able to kind of comment on that full community. When it comes to their own mental health and the mental health of the spaces around them, they're able to identify potential stressors that might not even be personal to them, but also to their peers, and they were just very thoughtful and intentional with those conversations we were able to have with them. And then lastly, with the middle school, they're closest in age to all of us, and they are so incredibly comfortable with having these conversations. They share their opinions very freely. They're very opinionated on the subject. They have well-developed positions and ideas, and they're very willing to share them. So you're seeing at that middle school level, like, they know what they're talking about, they're comfortable talking about it, and I think that's kind of what we're seeing with these younger ages too. They're just working on how to express and communicate those ideas. So across the board, it was very successful conversations. Our engagement was really high. We scaled those conversations, obviously, to adapt to the different age groups, and this was our first time really practicing that with an actual topic, with a topic like mental health, and I think we were really successful in being able to kind of scale those conversations to get the results we wanted at different age groups. Overall for the high school, our high school group has been meeting very regularly. We've been doing a lot of behind-the-scenes work. Again, now that we've been able to fully establish our own norms and protocols, we're kind of finalizing some practices when it comes to what do our agendas look like, what is our structure, what's our routine, how do we house all of our documents and work on our chain of command. And now that that's really being finalized, we're hoping to move on to some new things. One big area of growth that we want to focus on next year is actually elevating the high school voice and the high school student body voice. So our board has been really focused on, okay, what does our board take to these other district buildings, and hoping that they represent their student body well, but we need to work on giving space for our own student body here in the high school to share their opinions, to contact all of us freely. So not just focusing on the other district buildings, but really sinking some time into the high school is one space we hope to grow in. So we were able to achieve a lot this month when it came to for our students, and I think that these visits were some of our most successful yet. So for our community was that opportunity that was provided to a few of our board members to participate in a regional professional development. We had two different members of our board, President Abraham Blue and one of our board members, Avon Kriya, who were able to attend this PLC, and they both just raved about the experience. It was incredibly beneficial for them. They spoke about how they were able to connect with other local student board representatives and kind of talk to them. What's the structure like at your school's board? How are you enjoying interacting with them? Different schools do it in very different ways, whether they actually have a student on the board or they just have personal meetings with board reps, so having those connections was incredibly beneficial. And we're hoping that they provide room for expansion later down the line. So reconnecting with those new student body connections that they were able to make and kind of expanding on that to build more of a collaboration. This is obviously a very new process and procedure here at MRH. Some other schools have a more established program. Some other schools are looking to start a program. So kind of creating the same sort of collaborative network that the actual Board of Education can have with other schools at the student level is something that we hope to find the space and time and resources to do later down the line. So these are some photos of our students at the PLC, and like I said, they really just raved about the experience. It seems like it was incredibly valuable for them. They came away with a lot of great takeaways and new focuses and things for us to consider, so we really appreciate having that opportunity extended to us. Okay, that's all we have for this month. Are there any questions over any of that?
I do, Katie, thank
Yes.
you. So I love the topic on mental health and stressors, particularly looking at some of the indicators from the climate and culture data Mr. Estrada shared. Were there any requests or needs from students that they felt, whether it's counseling or resources, that we need to consider from either a policy standpoint or purchases to support in that area?
Yeah, I think definitely some students are very passionate about certain weaknesses or absences of support that they're seeing in the system. We also had a lot of students who spoke really positively about certain like manipulatives that counselors have, like the little fidget toys and the spaces that they're able to produce with those kind of materials and supplies were really heavily discussed, primarily at the elementary level. I know that the most opinionated with like ideas for improvement was definitely our middle school group, and they just spoke about, you know, easier access to counseling services, more visibility and awareness of those support systems, greater integration of mental health education and knowledge into the general school proceedings. The ECC children are a little too young to really quantify what they need or what they don't have. But like I said, I think there's certainly room for them to have more conversations on these kind of subjects, because at least the members of the board are clearly able to kind of engage in those subjects and provide some information on the topic.
What about at the high school level? Thinking about, and I look at attendance data with my team, and we are familiar with, you know, where students are mentally. Are there things that surface from the high school group in regards to what we can do from a governance and policy standpoint to actually support further?
I think a lot of what came up at the high school level was some of that just more natural, almost unavoidable stressors. The stuff like taking final exams is stressful, having to apply to college is stressful, participating even in that, like showing up and out every single day to the same school can be stressful. So we haven't been as clear in identifying like this is a resource or a program or a support system that could be improved upon, as much as just identifying those general stressors. And that's a conversation when we're able to access and kind of look at that climate and culture survey a little more closer, as Mr. Estrada is so willing to do with us. We'll be able to kind of, I hope, circle some more like definitive things that we can improve on and that the student body as a whole wants to see.
Perfect, thank you.
I had a question. You mentioned before about problems with transitioning from school to school, and you know, there's a big difference between like a freshman in high school and a senior in high school. It seems like that's, you know, kind of one of the largest areas, and I was wondering if it would be possible for you to maybe towards the end of the year grab like some data that we can use, sort of like a summary of things that we could take back and look at ways to help during those transitions. Be like, okay guys, we've been doing this for a year. What is it that we would want to tell the board about, or what we wish that had been there when we were doing these transitions, or something like that, so that we have an idea if there's something that we could do as a board to sort of benefit those students.
Yeah, I think we can certainly try. We've already discussed some stuff that the PAL board, some actions or projects that we could advise action on, buddy program, shadow days, those sort of transitional elements. So I'm sure we can work on trying to find a way to kind of quantify that into data, or even just speaking to students more about their personal experience and then bringing that testimony to the board could be beneficial. We'll have to look into a little more like what the actual issues with the transitions are, and then what we can do within our jurisdiction to assist.
Something I want to share for future board planning. So the regional PLC has determined that it will meet the first Saturday of December and the first Saturday of June every year. Now, I know y'all don't want to go after graduation, but maybe that's something for forward planning for you all to think about. That's obviously available to all of us, and we receive invitations. But it was really fantastic to show off, basically, because we had a lot of representation. Having 2 students there was a lot. We were able to show off this program, and there was a lot of interest from other school districts in learning about what we're doing. So I think we can continue to build on that momentum.
There is one that actually is replicating what we are doing directly, everything that we're doing. So we like to share our successes because we're better when we share. So thank you for that.
Thank you.
6.04 calendar of events. Just a reminder that candidate filing ends on December 26th at 5 p.m. That is at the Board of Elections in the county. So for anyone who is still considering filing, they're not open every day over the holidays, so check ahead before you go. Our work session on January 4th has been canceled, so please take the extra time. spend it with your families. January 9th, the board candidate personal financial disclosure reports are due. Phone a friend, those of us who have done it, it's not that traumatic, but welcome to your relationship with the Missouri Ethics Commission. It's an adventure. And also that night, on January 9th, we will have another community conversation at Schlafly, and our topic is
MTSS.
Systems of support.
Oh, man.
And have a great holiday, everyone, and enjoy your time off. That is not on the calendar, but it is in our hearts. 6.05, board candidate filing update. As of today, we have 3 candidates who have filed for the 2 3-year seats, and we have 2 candidates who have filed for the 1 1-year seat. So the number of candidates exceeding the number of seats in both races means that we will have 2 school board races this spring. So we'll see if the candidate pool grows larger, but as of today, it's a go, and we're excited. Any questions? 6.06, board member resignation. I'm not sure if you all here are aware of the news. It's been widely underreported that I have been appointed to a new position that precludes my ability to serve on this board. It would be a conflict of interest. So I start that position as Maplewood's new city manager on January 4th. So y'all have to say goodbye, and before I do that, I just want to say again, I said it in my letter, this has been the most important experience of my professional life, and has compelled me to grow in so many ways that I never expected. We are here together because we all want the same thing and we care so deeply, and the reward of this service has been doing that work alongside all of you, trying to meet those objectives. It's hard, long hours, a lot of sacrifice, but it's incredibly worthwhile. And as a very wise mentor said to me, if you enjoy that work and it is your purpose, go where you can have more impact, where you can do that every day, and stop giving short shrift to your actual paid employment. Don't tell Washington I said that. But thank you, Dr. Jameson, for your mentorship. You're somebody whose guidance I trust and value so deeply, and I really look forward to continuing our journey together down a different path, because you're going to see me a lot in COA. Just know that, okay? I'm with you at least monthly, so I'm excited to be continuing all of those relationships with you and really supporting the work you do in a different way, but perhaps more deeply and more meaningfully. So thank you. I miss you so much. I'm still here. It's just hard. So thank you. Thank you to all of you and to everybody who voted for me for giving me this incredible opportunity to serve. And I'm sorry to be going so soon.
Congratulations.
Yeah, I'm happy for you.
So with that, I think we have some reshuffling we need to do.
Yeah. On behalf of the remaining board members, we'd like to present you with a little token of our support. And should she open it? Okay, we'll let you. It's good.
There's some reading involved.
Yeah,
you may
want to.
It's certainly been an honor and a privilege to work alongside of you. You have certainly pushed this configuration of the district board to new heights. Again, we've accomplished much, just continuing to build on the great foundation that was set by boards before us, and you have maintained and continued that progress. So thank you very much for leading us. We have a high bar to continue to maintain here going forward.
I have every confidence in your ability to do it, and I have had the best board mentor ever.
Thank you. I've only been called old twice tonight. I do hate to get back to some procedural stuff,
Yes.
but linked in the resignation item, there is both of our policies that govern our governance of ourselves. I've been through a few of these resignations before, so I would like to suggest that our policy BBE -1 around vacancies, that we actually suspend that policy. It says that we would fill this unexpired term, which we know would only be until the April election, and considering the fact that we have a robust candidate pool for the April elections, I think we would be better served to let the voters decide rather than go through the processes of soliciting nominations and interviews and things for a 2-month seat. So that's not on the agenda currently, so perhaps in action items I will move to amend the agenda, but just wanted to make that clear so that no community members are tomorrow looking for a notice from MRH that they could sign up to fill Amber's shoes. You have to go to the election board to do that. Yes.
We'll add that to action items. And you all will, at your next meeting in January, be deciding who should be president until the reorg meeting in April after the election.
Yes, reshuffle some officer positions.
Well then, let's go ahead and move on to action items with.
So I'd like to move to amend the agenda, the action items to include suspension of policy BBE -1 until the April election. That's okay with you, Kat?
I got it.
Okay.
Second. So what item will that be? Do we want to make that?
We can add it.
I'll add the amended item at the top of action items, and let's make the suspension of BBE item 7.09A.
Thank you.
Okay.
Rather, let's make it 7.07. I'm sorry, I'm looking at it.
Okay.
Is that okay?
Yeah, we'll put it before the rest.
7.07B. All right. Item 7.01.
So it's been, we have.
Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah.
I was gonna say, do we have to make a motion to
This is
the?
what we
need a
should have
second.
done.
Second.
Josh seconded it.
Yes. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries. Agenda amended. Okay, so then, item 7.01, construction change orders. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move to approve the change orders as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.02, audited financial statements. Can I get a motion and a second?
Move to approve the audited financial statements as presented by KEB.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.03, prepayment of bond debt. Can I get a motion and a second?
Approve a resolution authorizing the redemption of general obligation bonds.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.04, new course proposal, middle school seat to table. Motion and a second.
Move to approve the new course middle school seat to table as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.05, new course proposal for math 6-7. Motion and a second.
I move to approve the new course proposal, math 6 and 7.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.06, new course proposal, math 7-8. Motion and a second.
Move to approve new course math 7-8 as presented.
Second.
All in favor? Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. 7.07, this is from our last meeting, new job description, summer school administrative intern.
Approve the new position, summer school administrative intern as presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Item 7.07B, motion to suspend policy BBE1 until the April election.
Move to approve suspending of policy BBE1. That one is presented.
Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. 7.08, board resignation. Motion and a second.
Move to approve the resignation as presented.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries.
I think you need to do this one.
Go
Item
ahead.
7.09, executive session. Can I please have a motion and a roll call?
I move to enter executive session in accordance with section 610.021, subsection 3, 9, 13, 18, and 19, and section 610.022 of the revised statutes of Missouri on December 21st, 2023 for the following specific reasons: personnel matters, safety matters.
Second.
Ms. Goldsman?
Yes.
Ms. Martinez?
Yes.
Ms. Francois?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Mr. Miller?
Yes.
Ms. Cochran?
Yes.
Somebody's got to get what's out. Meeting adjourned at 10:34.